Chapter 209. Devour. Before devouring the swords, Yi Xian was actually somewhat hesitant. This was because using the 8 swords as flying swords could greatly increase his battle prowess. But on second thought, no matter how strong the 8 swords were, they wouldn't allow him to kill a Dharma Realm expert. If he wanted to kill a Dharma Realm expert, he had to break through to the Divine Union Realm. Previously, because of Kuraki Academy and Dark World, Mo Wuji didn't dare to break through to the God Fusion Realm. Because the moment he broke through to the God Fusion Realm, the Myriad Laws Realm experts of Kuraki Academy and Dark World wouldn't need to suppress their cultivation to attack him. Apart from that, his cultivation realm wasn't that stable before, so he temporarily chose not to break through to the Divine Union Realm. But after the battle at Kuraki College, he could be said to have reached his limit. He had a new understanding of the Sword Tao. To him the time had come. After devouring a sword, Yi Xian instantly felt boundless energy radiate from his body. Very soon, the Spirit Elegance sword in his body trembled slightly. In an instant, the energy surged towards the Spirit Elegance sword like a tidal wave. About 15 minutes after the Spirit Elegance sword devoured it, an even purer energy radiated from the Spirit Elegance sword and spread towards his limbs and bones. Divine Union Realm. The so-called Divine Union Realm was about the perfect fusion of the physical body and the soul. The physical body and the soul were like 5 fingers. The 5 fingers were naturally connected, but that didn't mean that they could use the 5 fingers flexibly. The soul and body were naturally connected, but it could still be improved. This was the so-called Divine Union Realm. Reaching Divine Union, the body and soul would improve, and the body would also undergo a qualitative transformation. What Yi Xian needed to do now was to improve his body and soul and transform again. About an hour later, Yi Xian devoured another sword. Just like that, within the prison pagoda, Yi Xian's aura began to grow stronger. Outside the prison pagoda, little demon Tuoba was somewhat bored. She sat on the pole and her 2 small feet floated outside the boat. Right at this moment, a cloud ship suddenly appeared behind them. That cloud ship was extremely swift, and in a short while, it had surpassed the cloud ship that she and Yi Xian were on. After being surpassed, little demon Tuoba turned around to look at that cloud ship. A man in embroidered robes was standing on that cloud ship. The man was dressed very luxuriously. He wore an embroidered robe with a faintly glowing spirit jade tied to his waist. One look and anyone could tell that he was either rich or noble. As though sensing little demon Tuoba's gaze, the man suddenly turned his head to look at little demon Tuoba. His eyes lit up when he saw little demon Tuoba. He gently pressed down with his right hand, causing the cloud ship to instantly slow down. The brocade-robed man looked at little demon Tuoba and smiled. "May I know how I should address you, young lady?" Little monster Tuoba asked calmly, "Is there anything you need?" The man in embroidered clothes smiled and said, "When I first saw you, I felt that you were like a celestial being. To be honest, I want to be friends with you. What do you think?" "Friend?" Tuoba blinked. "You want to be friends with me?" The man in embroidered clothes nodded. "If I can be friends with you, it would be my honor for 3 lifetimes. Little demon Tuoba glanced at the man in embroidered clothes and said calmly, "If you want to be friends with me, aren't you going to express it?" "Express it?" The man in embroidered clothes' expression stiffened slightly. A moment later, he seemed to have thought of something and his lips curled up slightly. A woman that could be settled with money was naturally the best. It could save him a lot of trouble. The man in embroidered clothes flicked his finger and a card flew to little demon Tuoba. "There are 500,000 gold coins in this card. Consider it my greeting gift to you, young lady." 500,000 gold coins. Little demon Tuoba took a look at the card and shook her head with a sigh. "No wonder my father said that it's hard to find a soulmate in this world." Little Yezi did not hesitate to spend hundreds of millions of gold coins to be friends with me. It seems that little Yezi is my soulmate. As she spoke, she flicked her finger and the card flew to the man in embroidered clothes. "Let's go. I, little demon Tuoba, only make friends with people with good foresight like little Yezi. As for you, you're too poor. I don't want to be friends with you." The man in embroidered clothes narrowed his eyes. "Are you not going to give me any face?" His voice was slightly cold and carried a trace of threat. Hearing this, little demon Tuoba turned to look at the man in embroidered clothes. Without any nonsense, she suddenly smashed out with her hammer. The man in embroidered clothes' expression changed drastically. His body trembled and he retreated dozens of feet to the left. The cloud ship that he was originally on instantly cracked and turned into powder. Seeing this scene, the man in embroidered clothes' face turned slightly pale. The moment an expert made a move, it was obvious whether or not he was an expert. He knew that he had offended someone he should not have offended. The man in embroidered clothes hurriedly bowed slightly to little demon Tuoba. I hope that young lady is magnanimous enough to forgive me for my previous offense. Little demon Tuoba stretched out her small hand. Leave the things here. You can leave. The man in embroidered clothes. About 15 minutes later, little demon Tuoba sat on the pole and was counting a large pile of things. This is little Yezi's. This is mine. This is little Yezi's. This is mine. This is little Yezi's. And this is also for little Yezi. One day later. Ning country's imperial capital. At this moment the imperial capital of the Ning kingdom was in chaos. Because too many profounders from the central divine prefecture had surged into the city. Ordinary soldiers were utterly helpless against these cultivators from the central divine prefecture. However, that wasn't the main reason. The main reason was that the spirit energy in Pine prefecture had dried up, and the hearts of the people were in chaos. It was especially so for the imperial capital of the Ning kingdom. The spirit energy there was vanishing at a shocking speed every single day. In the beginning, the imperial capital of the Ning kingdom was barely able to maintain its peace with the suppression of the imperial family of the Ning kingdom, and no major trouble had arisen. However, once these cultivators from the central divine prefecture entered the imperial capital, the situation had instantly gone out of control. Because ordinary soldiers weren't able to deal with these fellows from the central divine prefecture at all. When they saw these fellows from the central divine prefecture act recklessly and cause trouble in the city, some people in the city couldn't restrain themselves any longer. So, the entire city had gradually fallen into chaos. It wasn't just the city that was in chaos, even the imperial palace of the Ning kingdom was in imminent danger. At this moment, 2 of the 4 city gates of the imperial palace had fallen into enemy hands, and it was the cultivators from the central divine prefecture who had attacked those city gates. There were mercenaries, disciples of the clans, and independent cultivators amongst them. Moreover, they traveled so far to Pine prefecture for the sake of getting rich. Plunder like crazy. That was what they wanted to do. That was exactly what they wanted to do. In addition to the cultivators from the central divine prefecture, there were also cultivators from the Ning kingdom itself. Among them were independent cultivators and ordinary cultivators, but most were disciples of the aristocratic families. Within the borders of the Ning kingdom, the Ning family was undoubtedly the #1 aristocratic family. Apart from the Ning family, there were also some other ancient aristocratic families. These families didn't choose to stand with the Ning kingdom at its most critical moment, but instead chose to take advantage of the situation. In the eyes of these aristocratic families and countless others, the Ning kingdom was bound to fall. This was because the Joyful Union sect and the Joyful sect from the Divine Central Divine Prefecture were going to attack the imperial family of the Ning kingdom. The Ning kingdom was considered a decent force in Pine Prefecture, but compared to these forces from the Divine Central Divine Prefecture, there was still a considerable gap. At this moment, both of them were staring at Tuoba Yin, who was among the soldiers not far away. Their eyes were filled with undisguised greed and lust. The middle-aged man suddenly smiled evilly. It really is an inner charm body. If it can be developed, tisk tisk. The skinny old man grinned. Indeed, a rare inner charm body. This old man is willing to die for it, haha. At this moment, the old woman behind Tuoba Yin suddenly stepped forward. Everyone, His Majesty and State Scholar Yi Xian of the Jiang Kingdom, look at each other. Please give him some face. Yi Xian? The middle-aged man frowned slightly. What kind of rubbish is this? Never heard of it. P.S. It's 2019. I'm finally 18. Happy New Year to everyone. Finally, some readers say that I'm still updating my novel even though my family is in the hospital. I'm not a man. I'm the only one in the family who has some income from writing. The hospital fees are unimaginable to ordinary people. Also, my brother is studying at home, and I'm paying for his tuition. I have to make a living too. Sincerely, I hope some readers don't go against me. I also want to thank the readers who have always supported me, such as Drunken Hongchen, Seventh Sister, Licking 100, Xiaoyao Z, and some readers who give me monthly votes every day but don't say much. You guys can be more high profile. Finally, I'm lucky to have met you guys. Chapter 210. Hearing the middle-aged man's words, the old woman behind Tuoba Yan's face sank. She didn't expect that these people wouldn't even give face to Yi Xian. It should be known that Yi Xian was undoubtedly the most famous in Qingzhou. Apart from Great Cloud Empire, Blue Waves Academy could be said to be the strongest force in Qingzhou. Apart from Blue Waves Academy, Yi Xian's strength was also very frightening. It could be said that Yi Xian had a certain deterrent force in the entire Qingzhou. However, she didn't expect that these people wouldn't give face at all. Yi Xian. At this moment, the red-robed old man beside the middle-aged man frowned slightly. The middle-aged man looked at the red-robed old man. Do you know this person, Brother Jiang Yi? The old man named Jiang Yi shook his head. I don't know him. I have only heard of him. It is said that he had a conflict with Dark World and Karaki Academy. Karaki Academy even sent experts to Qingzhou. As for the final result, I don't know. Result? Apart from Qingzhou, the matter of Karaki Academy didn't spread to the Central Divine Continent. Because they had been suppressed by the Realm Protector, the death of 2 members of the Realm Protector Alliance was undoubtedly a great loss of face for the Realm Protector Alliance. They naturally wouldn't let this matter spread because it would affect the prestige of the Realm Protector Alliance. All along, Realm Protector Alliance couldn't be offended. But now, if people knew that 2 people from Realm Protector Alliance were killed, the prestige of Realm Protector Alliance would be greatly reduced in the hearts of people. Therefore, under the suppression of Realm Protector Alliance except for a few major forces, no one knew what happened to Karaki Academy. The coquettish middle-aged man suddenly smiled. Brother Jiang Yi, rest assured. In Qingzhou except for Great Cloud Empire, the other forces are just small shrimps. Without the Realm Protector, these forces are less than ants to us. Jiang Yi nodded slightly. That's true. Then he looked at Tuoba Yen not far away with an obscene smile. This woman has an inner charm physique. This physique is really rare and can't be missed. Moreover, the Ning country's national strength is not weak. After we capture this woman, the Ning country's national treasury and the entire Ning country will be ours. We will have both the people and the wealth, ha. The coquettish middle-aged man chuckled. That's true. I never thought that I would be able to become an emperor after coming to this tiny azure province, ha. With that he took a step forward. With this step, an invisible pressure suddenly swept towards Tuoba Yen and the others. Behind Tuoba Yen, the old woman and the old man suddenly stepped forward. The old woman raised her hand and struck. Boom. The pressure released by the coquettish middle-aged man instantly dissipated. The middle-aged man's gaze landed on the old woman. He smiled and said, interesting. As he spoke, he turned to look at the 2 old men not far away. You two, since you're here, it's only natural for you to contribute. I'll leave these 2 to you. How about it? The 2 elders looked at each other and nodded. Sure. With that, the 2 of them charged toward the old woman and the old man behind Tuoba Yen. Behind Tuoba Yen, the old woman said in a deep voice, Take care, your majesty. As soon as she finished speaking, she and the old man beside her trembled, and they turned into a blur as they shot out. Soon, the 4 Dharma realm experts began fighting in the air. Below, the coquettish middle-aged man and Jiang Yi walked towards Tuoba Yen. None of the soldiers flinched in front of Tuoba Yen. Although they knew that they were not even comparable to ants before the middle-aged man and the old man, they did not retreat. Behind them was the king of the Ning country, the person they were loyal to. Tuoba Yen was expressionless. That was because she was holding 2 talismans that emitted heat energy in her wide sleeves. The blazing explosion talisman. It was equivalent to a heaven-grade spiritual weapon, but it was a one-time use item. Although it was a one-time use item, its power was extraordinary. If used well, it could even kill a Dharma realm expert. Of course, it would be difficult for her to live, or rather she did not intend to live. Because she knew very well that living would be more painful than death. The coquettish middle-aged man moved closer and closer, and he didn't conceal the greed in his eyes as he gazed at Tuoba Yen. Tuoba Yen circulated her profound energy, and the pyroblast talismans in her hand shook violently and were about to explode. Meanwhile, a ray of light suddenly descended from the sky. Everyone in the surroundings looked up into the sky in succession. Tuoba Yen looked up as well. The speed of the sword light was extremely fast, like a falling meteor, incomparably swift. It didn't take long for the coquettish middle-aged man's expression to change, because he noticed that the ray of light was actually targeting him. The middle-aged man's expression instantly turned icy cold, and then he tossed his right hand up lightly. In an instant, a pink ribbon shot into the sky and shot towards the ray of light. The sword arrived in midair. The pink ribbon forcefully blocked the ray of light, but it suddenly shook violently in the next moment. Bang! The pink ribbon was blasted flying back to the middle-aged man. Meanwhile, the ray of light had arrived above him. The middle-aged man's pupils constricted slightly. This time he didn't choose to resist it head-on, and he flashed backward by over 30 m. He just retreated when a young man appeared in front of Tuoba Yen. It was none other than Yi Xian. On the other hand, little demon Tuoba was sizing up the surroundings curiously by Yi Xian's side. Yi Xian pointed the spirit beauty sword at the middle-aged man nearby. Wait a moment. I'll be right back for your head. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned to look at Tuoba Yen. At this moment, Tuoba Yen was looking at him as well. Yi Xian grinned. Surprised? Surprised? Tuoba Yen didn't speak, but the pyroblast talisman in her sleeve gradually calmed down. Yi Xian hugged Tuoba Yen lightly. Leave everything to me. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and walked towards the coquettish middle-aged man nearby. Tuoba Yen gazed at Yi Xian's back silently. Meanwhile, little demon Tuoba suddenly walked over to Tuoba Yen and sized him up. Your surname Tuoba as well? Tuoba Yen looked at little demon Tuoba and nodded slightly. Little demon Tuoba grinned. What a coincidence. My surname is also Tuoba. Tuoba Yen was speechless. Not far away, Yi Xian walked towards the coquettish middle-aged man with the spirit beauty sword in his hand. At this moment, the spirit beauty sword was already middle grade. After devouring 8 swords, he did not reach the divine union realm. Hence, he looked for the 6th floor master to buy a true grade sword and 3 bright grade superior grade swords for him. He exchanged 2 heaven grade cultivation techniques for these 4 swords. To be honest, he felt his heart ache and was somewhat reluctant to part with 2 heaven grade martial techniques. However, he had no choice. He had to part with them even if he was reluctant. He had to reach the divine union realm. Only by reaching the divine union realm could he fight against a myriad Dharma realm expert. After devouring close to 11 bright grade superior grade swords and 1 true grade sword, he reached the divine union realm. Not only did he reach the divine union realm, but the spirit beauty sword also reached middle grade. After breaking through to the divine union realm, he wanted to find someone to spar with. He wanted to see if there was still a gap between him and the myriad Dharma realm. Opposite Yi Xian, the coquettish middle-aged man sized up Yi Xian and narrowed his eyes. Sword Master. Yi Xian suddenly raised his sword and charged forward. In an instant, a ray of sword light reached the center of the coquettish middle-aged man's brows. The speed of this sword was extraordinarily fast. Even the myriad Dharma realm middle-aged man's expression changed when he saw the speed and power of this sword. The middle-aged man suddenly opened his palm. In an instant, countless tiny pink ribbons flew out from his palm. These pink ribbons instantly wrapped around the spirit beauty sword in Yi Xian's hand. Yi Xian's sword could no longer advance. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly released his hand and threw a punch at the middle-aged man's head. A sinister look flashed in the middle-aged man's eyes. He did not dodge. Instead, he clenched his left hand into a fist and punched at Yi Xian's punch. Bam! The moment their fists collided, an explosion was heard. Yi Xian was sent flying. However, the moment Yi Xian was sent flying, Yi Xian's right hand suddenly grabbed the hilt of the spirit beauty sword. With the middle-aged man's strength, the spirit beauty sword broke free from the pink ribbons. At this moment, Yi Xian had already retreated 10 feet away. As soon as he stopped, Yi Xian stomped on the ground with his right foot and dashed forward. When Yi Xian charged at the middle-aged man, the spirit beauty sword in his hand suddenly exploded with a terrifying sword force. When he arrived at a position about 10 feet away from the middle-aged man, he raised his sword and slashed down. One sword to decide life and death. At this moment, the force in his sword grew like a volcano eruption. The power of this sword instantly surpassed the myriad Dharma realm and approached the Dharma defensive realm. When he saw Yi Xian's sword, the middle-aged man was shocked. This was because this sword had greatly exceeded his expectations. This wasn't a power that a divine union realm cultivator could achieve. Not daring to think too much, the middle-aged man hurriedly took half a step back. In the next moment, countless pink ribbons suddenly swept out from his body. These pink ribbons carried a pink air current that instantly drowned Yi Xian and his sword. There was a moment of silence. Boom! Those pink ribbons suddenly exploded. Immediately after, a figure retreated rapidly. It was the middle-aged man. The middle-aged man retreated for a full 10 feet without stopping. Along the way, the ground he retreated exploded inch by inch, forming a gully that was 10 feet deep. Everyone in the surroundings was stunned when they witnessed this scene. A divine union realm cultivator sent a myriad Dharma realm cultivator flying? Everyone was in disbelief. On the battlefield, after Yi Xian sent the middle-aged man flying, he didn't stop. The spirit beauty sword in his hand suddenly turned into a sword light and entered the sword case on his back. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian suddenly pointed at the middle-aged man. A ray of sword light flashed. It was so fast that even the old man Jiang Yi couldn't see the trajectory of the sword clearly. The moment the spirit beauty sword flew out, the middle-aged man's expression changed drastically. He put his hands together and was about to attack, but at this moment, a sword had pierced through his forehead. The battlefield fell silent. Yi Xian walked to the middle-aged man with the sword case on his back. The middle-aged man hadn't died yet, and he stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "You!" Yi Xian suddenly punched the middle-aged man's face. Bang! The middle-aged man's head exploded before he could finish speaking, and blood splattered everywhere. Yi Xian sheathed the spirit beauty sword and said indifferently, "I'll kill whoever dares to touch my people." As soon as he finished speaking, he took the man's storage ring and turned to leave. Everyone, Genius 1 second to remember website. Mobile version. Chapter 211. A deathly silence filled the area. A Divine Union Realm expert killing a myriad Dharma Realm expert. Everyone was stunned. After all, there was a world of difference between a myriad Dharma Realm expert and a Divine Union Realm expert. No one would find it strange if a Nether Passage Realm expert killed a Divine Union Realm expert, because the gap between the two realms wasn't that great. However, the gap between the Divine Union Realm and the Myriad Dharma Realm was enormous, and there was a qualitative difference. But now, a Divine Union Realm expert had killed a Myriad Dharma Realm expert right in front of them. Elder Jiang Yi of the Joyful Union sect stared fixedly at Yi Xian, a solemn expression in his eyes. In Azure Province, it was extremely difficult for a Divine Union Realm expert to kill a Myriad Dharma Realm expert, or perhaps it was practically impossible. But in the distant Divine Central Continent, it wasn't rare for a Divine Union Realm expert to kill a Myriad Dharma Realm expert. In theory, it was extremely possible for those in the top 10 of the monster rankings to do so. As for those in the top 5, they had a 100% chance of doing so. This meant that Yi Xian was at least at the level of those in the top 10 of the monster rankings. How could such a person be ordinary? But he was truly unwilling to give up now. A good cauldron was simply too important to their sect. Moreover, the Ning Kingdom had an enormous amount of wealth. He was truly unwilling to give up just like that. The solemn expression in Jiang Ye's eyes turned icy cold. The experts from the Divine Central Continent all looked at Yi Xian with unfriendly expressions, and some of them didn't even bother concealing their killing intent. The Ning Kingdom's enormous wealth was right in front of them, so how could they give up just like that? Some of the native descendants of the Ning Kingdom did indeed intend to retreat. A person's reputation was like a tree's shadow, and Yi Xian's prestige in Azure Province was undoubtedly great. News of Yi Xian charging into the Chu Kingdom's imperial palace alone and killing the kings of the Chu Kingdom and the Yu Kingdom had practically spread throughout Azure Province. Who wouldn't fear him? Even Kuraki Academy was helpless against Yi Xian. Jiang Yi spoke abruptly when he saw the intention to retreat. The kingdom of Ning is a kingdom at any rate. How much wealth does it have accumulated? If you give up now, how long do you think you can survive in this Azure Province where the spiritual chi is exhausted? The others in the surroundings exchanged glances when they heard this, and they were slightly hesitant. Jiang Yi continued, "He's just a divine combination realm cultivator. We have so many people on our side, why should we be afraid of him? Let's join forces to eliminate this person and share the wealth of the Ning nation. Isn't that perfect?" The others in the surroundings were instantly tempted when they heard Jiang Yi. The wealth of the Ning kingdom. What was the purpose of these people coming here? Naturally, it was for money. In this era of spiritual energy depletion, the most important thing was to stay alive, and to stay alive, one needed spirit stones, a lot of spirit stones. What are you afraid of? Right at this moment, a man suddenly stood out. He stared fixedly at Yi Xian, who was not far away, and said fiercely, "Isn't it just Yi Xian? He doesn't have 3 heads and 6 arms. There are so many of us. If we work together to kill him, but..." The man's voice stopped abruptly because a sword had suddenly appeared between his brows. The sword had appeared out of nowhere and everyone was stunned. Only Jiang Yi and the other experts of the Dharma realm knew how the sword had appeared. The sword had flown out from the sword box on Yi Xian's back, and it was too fast. It was so fast that they could only see a blurry trajectory. At this moment, they realized that the sword was a mid-grade truth rank sword, and the sword box on Yi Xian's back was truth rank as well. A set of divine equipment. Under the gazes of everyone, Yi Xian walked over to the man who spoke earlier. Yi Xian grinned, "The wind was too strong earlier, so I didn't hear what you said clearly. Can you say it again?" The man looked at Yi Xian and there was a mark on his forehead. "This chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page." Cold sweat flowed down his back. He knew that Yi Xian was very strong, but he hadn't imagined that Yi Xian was strong to this extent that he couldn't even fight back. He shouldn't have stood out. At this moment, the man was filled with regret. Not daring to think too much, the man revealed an unnatural smile. Yi State Scholar Yi, Yi Xian's sword suddenly stabbed forward. The spirit elegant sword instantly pierced between the man's brows, and the man's voice stopped abruptly. The man's eyes were wide open, and they were filled with resentment. Yi Xian said softly, "Sorry, my hand shook a little. Please forgive me." "Don't forgive me? Hit me then." The man's body was trembling from anger. Yi Xian didn't waste any more time. He drew the spirit elegant sword and turned to walk toward Tuoba Yen. Behind him, blood spurted out from between the man's brows, and he fell to the ground in an instant. Countless people in the field had expressions of fear. Even Jiang Yi had a trace of fear in his eyes. Even he had to be wary of Yi Xian's strength because his strength was similar to that of the coquettish middle-aged man from before. Since Yi Xian had the ability to kill the coquettish middle-aged man, then Yi Xian had the ability to kill him as well. That was why he hadn't made a move until now. Wait for someone to come. Yi Xian walked over to Tuoba Yen, and Tuoba Yen gazed at Yi Xian in silence. Yi Xian suddenly stretched out his hand and gently stroked Tuoba Yan's face, and he said softly, "You've lost a lot of weight since we parted that day." Tuoba Yen gazed at Yi Xian in silence, but her hands were slowly clenched tightly within her sleeves. Yi Xian suddenly gazed at a soldier by Tuoba Yan's side. "Get a chair for my Yen. Don't let her tire herself out." The soldier was stunned, and then he hurriedly turned around and ran over. It didn't take long for a few soldiers to carry a dragon chair over to Tuoba Yan's back. Yi Xian wrapped his arms around Tuoba Yan's shoulders and made her sit on the dragon chair. Tuoba Yan still remained silent. Meanwhile, Tuoba Yan suddenly walked over to Tuoba Yan and grinned, "I'm tired as well. Let's squeeze." As she spoke, she sat down by Tuoba Yan's side. The dragon chair was very large and it was entirely capable of seating 2 people. Yi Xian raised his head and glanced up into the sky. At this moment, the 4 Dharma realm experts were still locked in battle, and both sides were evenly matched. Yi Xian was just about to attack when a strand of divine sense suddenly pressed down upon him. It was the pressure of Jiang Ye's divine sense. Yi Xian gazed at Jiang Yi who stood nearby. "Then I'll deal with you first." As soon as he finished speaking, he stomped his right foot on the ground. The instant his foot touched the ground, his entire body transformed into a shadow that shot out explosively. At the same time, a strand of sword light instantly arrived before Jiang Yi. Jiang Yi, who was aware of Yi Xian's strength, naturally didn't dare to be careless. At the moment Yi Xian attacked, a red mirror suddenly appeared in his hand. His profound energy surged into the mirror, and the red mirror trembled slightly. A strand of red light surged out like a blazing flame, instantly drowning Yi Xian's sword light. Boom. 2 figures retreated repeatedly. It was Yi Xian and Jiang Yi. Countless sword lights and flames sputtered between the 2 of them, and the ground around them was a mess. As for the others in the surroundings, they retreated explosively and didn't dare to get too close. As soon as Yi Xian stopped, the spirit gray sword in his hand suddenly flew into the sword case behind him. In the next moment, Yi Xian took a step forward and pointed a finger forward. Swish! A strand of sword light slashed through the battlefield. At the moment the sword light appeared, Jiang Ye's expression changed drastically. He suddenly let go of the red mirror in his right hand, and his left hand formed a strange seal. In an instant, the red mirror before him actually started burning. This chapter isn't finished, please continue. Rise. Meanwhile, Yi Xian's flying sword had arrived, and it directly slashed onto the burning red mirror. Bang! A strand of dark red flames suddenly erupted from the red mirror. However, the flames weren't able to devour Yi Xian's sword light. Conversely, the flames were directly suppressed by Yi Xian's sword light as soon as they appeared. For a time, the sword and mirror were actually in a stalemate. But in next to no time, the spirit grace sword suddenly flew back and directly entered the sword case behind Yi Xian. But in the next moment, it flew out once more, and this time, its speed was even faster than before. This sword slashed onto the red mirror once more. Bang! Along with an explosion, the red mirror was blasted flying, and Jiang Yi was blasted flying as well. The red mirror carried Jiang Yi along as it flew over 100 m away, yet Jiang Yi hadn't stopped when a sword slashed over once more like a bolt of lightning. Jiang Ye's expression changed drastically, and he raised the red mirror with both hands and pushed it forward. Bang! The red mirror shook violently and directly cracked apart. At the same time, Jiang Yi and the cracked red mirror were blasted over 100 m away once more. As soon as he stopped, the spirit gray sword slashed over once more. Jiang Yi was horrified in his heart. At this moment he had no other choice but to use the red mirror to block it once more. The sword arrived. Bang! The red mirror shook violently, and then it directly exploded apart. The formidable force instantly blasted Jiang Yi, who was behind the red mirror, flying over 30 m away. However, he hadn't even stopped when Yi Xian suddenly charged forward swiftly with his sword in hand. This charge directly arrived above Jiang Yi, and then he suddenly slashed down with the spirit gray sword in both hands. A single strike to decide life and death. There was no doubt that this strike was meant to kill with a single strike. Sensing the power in Yi Xian's strike, Jiang Yi was horrified. He pulled with both hands and a golden talisman suddenly appeared above his head. Yi Xian's sword happened to slash onto this talisman. Bang! With a loud explosion, Yi Xian's entire body was blasted away. Over 100 m away, Yi Xian had just landed on the ground when the ground beneath his feet cracked open. A smear of blood slowly flowed out from the corner of his mouth. Yi Xian wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth and raised his head to look at Jiang Yi, who wasn't far away. At this moment, the golden talisman in front of Jiang Yi had already started burning and was slowly disappearing. Jiang Yi's heart was bleeding as he watched the golden talisman slowly disappear. He had spent close to 10 million supreme-grade spirit stones to purchase this life-saving golden talisman. 10 million supreme-grade spirit stones. In the past, 10 million supreme-grade spirit stones wasn't considered a lot, but now 10 million supreme-grade spirit stones was undoubtedly a huge sum of money. The loss was too great. Jiang Yi raised his head to look at Yi Xian, who wasn't far away, and said fiercely, "You meddlesome be*****starred, this old man will definitely tear you to pieces." As soon as he finished speaking, he suddenly turned his head to look at the distant palace. There, close to 100 cavalrymen were galloping over, and wherever they passed, the ground would directly burn. And the leader was a woman in silver armor. Seeing this scene, Jiang Yi was stunned for a moment, and then he suddenly laughed out loud. "Yi Xian, although my people haven't arrived yet, there are many who want your Ning kingdom to perish. This cavalryman's momentum is like a rainbow, and one look and you can tell that they are the elites of 100 battles. This Ning kingdom is doomed." P.S. Today a reader found me and scolded me as soon as he added me. He said that I was shameless and plagiarized the Invincible Sword Realm. He even showed me a screenshot and said that the World Prison Pagoda appeared in the Invincible Sword Realm. He said that I didn't have a profession to obtain it, so I can't create it. I was stunned for a long time. In the end, I found out that what he saw was a pirated version, and the author of the pirated version was actually not me. I said that the Invincible Sword Realm was written by me, but he didn't believe me. Moreover, he even wanted to report me. What should I do? Waiting online. End of this chapter. Chapter 212. Yi Xian's expression instantly turned slightly strange when he heard Jiang Yi's words. Outside the imperial palace, the cavalrymen marched in an orderly manner, and every single one of them emanated a fierce murderous aura as if they were born to kill. Just their murderous aura was enough to strike fear into the hearts of others. The cavalrymen were similar to the Black Flame Army of Great Cloud Empire, but there were also differences because they cultivated the unique murderous aura technique. The greater the murderous intent of the murderous aura technique, the stronger their combat strength would be. Even though there were only 100 of them, the aura and murderous intent they emanated was enough to move even the experts from the Central Divine Prefecture. They weren't weaker than some of the Dao soldiers of the Central Divine Prefecture. The cavalrymen were very swift, and they arrived in front of Yi Xian in the blink of an eye. Besides the silver-armored woman in the lead, all the other soldiers knelt on one knee and said in unison, "Greetings, Dean." Their voices were deafening like a bell. Dean? Everyone in the surroundings was dumbstruck. Are they Yi Xian's subordinates? Yi Xian felt rather gratified when he sensed the aura and imposing manner of the Dao soldiers of Blue Waves Academy. This was a Dao soldier that he had spent a great deal of effort to forge. He had spent a great deal of effort to forge this Dao soldier, and this Dao soldier did not disappoint him. It could be said that these Dao soldiers weren't the slightest bit weaker than the Black Flame Army of Great Cloud Empire. Meanwhile, the silver-armored woman walked over to Yi Xian. She wore a helmet and a mask, so only her eyes could be seen. She was naturally Jiang Jiu, the commander of the cavalrymen. Jiang Jiu sized up Yi Xian. Divine Combination Realm? Yi Xian nodded. I just arrived. Jiang Jiu nodded slightly. You're the dean, so give the order. Yi Xian grinned and was about to speak, but little demon Tuoba suddenly coughed lightly. and then she walked over to Yi Xian's side with a slightly solemn expression. Little demon Tuoba. Yi Xian suddenly came to his senses and hastily introduced, Little Nine and everyone else, let me introduce you. This person beside me is called Little Demon Tuoba. She comes from the Central Divine Continent and is ranked 8th on the demon-level geniuses list. Right, she is also the Vice Dean of our Blue Waves Academy. When you see her, you must show the same respect as when you see me. The cavalrymen were startled, but they quickly regained their senses. They rose to their feet and bowed deeply at Little Demon Tuoba. Greetings, Vice Dean. A satisfied smile instantly arose on the corners of Tuoba's mouth when she saw everyone greet her. She nodded and spoke in a slightly old-fashioned manner, there's no need to be so courteous. At this point she suddenly looked at Yi Xian and whispered, what should I say next? Yi Xian said seriously, let them kill all the people from the Divine Central Continent. Little Monster Tuoba nodded. Actually, I think so too. Yi Xian, Little Demon Tuoba suddenly pointed angrily at the experts from the Divine Central Continent in the distance. You scoundrels, instead of staying in the Divine Central Continent, you came to Azure Prefecture to commit evil. Do you still have a conscience? Do you still have humanity? I'm telling you, the weather will be cloudy today. At this point she hastily looked at Yi Xian. What should I say next? Everyone, Yi Xian's face was also full of black lines. Don't say anything else. Let's fight. Little Demon Tuoba shook her head. No, I've read a book. It says that before a battle, momentum is very important. We must overwhelm them with momentum. Just watch me. At this point, she turned to look at the nearby experts from the Divine Central Continent. I'm telling you what you're doing is wrong, you. Cut the King crap. At this moment, a man suddenly stepped forward and said fiercely, if you want to fight, let's fight. What's with all the nonsense? There are so many of us, do you think we're afraid of you? Right at this moment, Little Demon Tuoba suddenly tossed the hammer in his hand. Bang. The man didn't even have time to react before he was blasted flying. In midair, his body exploded into pieces and blood sprayed everywhere. Everyone, Little Demon Tuoba glanced coldly at the battlefield and she was very angry. I'd intended to subdue the enemy without a fight, but now it would seem like all of you trash don't deserve to live. As soon as she finished speaking, she charged forward with her hammer in hand. The blue-tied Dao soldiers charged after her as well. The experts from the Divine Central Continent turned pale when they saw Little Demon Tuoba and the blue-tied Dao soldiers charge at them, and some even had the intention to retreat. Meanwhile, Jiang Yi suddenly spoke angrily from nearby, we have 600 to 700 people and they only have 100. Why should we be afraid of them? The weakest equipment these cavalrymen wear is at the light grade. If we kill them, all of us will become rich. Kill. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged forward. As for the experts from the Divine Central Continent, they hesitated for a moment, but in the end they couldn't resist the temptation of becoming rich and they charged forward. In terms of numbers, Yi Xian's side was at a disadvantage indeed. However, it was only a disadvantage in terms of numbers. In terms of quality, Yi Xian's side had an advantage. Especially when they had Little Demon Tuoba. Although this girl was a little heartless, she was really strong. Even he didn't dare say that he could defeat her with absolute certainty. Little Demon Tuoba took the lead and charged into the crowd. She swung her hammer wildly, and over a dozen people died on the spot in an instant. No one could withstand a single hit from her hammer. After all, she was a monster in the top 10 of the genius level rankings. As for the blue-tied Dao soldiers, they could be said to be invincible. They charged wildly and no one could stop them wherever they passed. Not only were the blue-tied Dao soldiers powerful individually, but their equipment was also extremely terrifying. Ordinary experts couldn't harm them at all. The battle had just begun, but the situation was already clear. More than 100 blue-tied Dao soldiers were forcefully suppressing hundreds of experts from the Divine Central Continent. In truth, apart from the blue-tied Dao soldiers' own strength and Little Demon Tuoba's, there was another reason. The experts from the Divine Central Continent weren't organized, and they scattered as soon as they charged. Moreover, each of them harbored ulterior motives and wanted others to risk their lives while they reaped the benefits. When facing an ordinary army, they were naturally successful in every endeavor because their individual strength far surpassed that of ordinary soldiers, and they could win easily. However, what they encountered now was a team of well-trained Dao soldiers with incomparably powerful individual strength. There was only one thought in the minds of these blue-tied Dao soldiers: kill. Jiang Yi charged at the front. His target was the blue-tied Dao soldiers, but before he could make a move, Yi Xian charged in front of him with a sword in hand and slashed down viciously. Bam! Jiang Yi was sent flying nearly 1,000 feet away. As soon as he stopped, a flying sword suddenly flew out from the sword case on Yi Xian's back. In the blink of an eye, the flying sword was in front of him. A flying sword again. Jiang Yi was horrified. This time he didn't dare to take the blow head-on. He forcefully dodged to the left, but he was still a little too slow. Rip! An arm flew off, blood spurting out like a fountain. After the elegant spirit sword severed Jiang Ye's arm, it immediately flew back into the sword case. The sword didn't fly out again because Jiang Yi had already retreated outside the imperial palace, putting a considerable distance between them. Although the flying sword could reach him at this distance, its power would be greatly reduced. Jiang Yi stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Aside from resentment, there was also deep fear in his eyes. Yi Xian's flying sword was too terrifying. At this moment, the experts from the divine central continent were beginning to crumble. After witnessing the terror of the blue-tide Dao soldiers, some of the experts from the divine central continent had already begun to flee. They were here to seek wealth, not to throw away their lives. When they saw someone flee, the remaining people immediately lost their will to fight and began to flee as well. Thus, some of the experts from the divine central continent fled while others died. Jiang Ye's expression was extremely unsightly. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly charged forward. Jiang Ye's expression changed drastically, and he didn't even think about it before drifting back. He retreated 50 to 60 meters, and as soon as he stopped, Yi Xian appeared where he had been standing earlier. The distance between the two of them was still very large. Yi Xian frowned. With his current strength, he could defeat an expert of the myriad Dharma realm, but if Jiang Yi didn't fight and just kept dodging, then he really couldn't do anything to him. Ignoring Jiang Yi, Yi Xian turned around. The elegant spirit sword suddenly flew over 30 meters away from the sword case on his back, and the sword pierced through the forehead of an expert from the divine central continent. It didn't take long for almost 200 corpses to appear on the battlefield. The rest of the experts from the divine central continent had fled. As for the disciples of the Ning kingdom, they'd fled when they saw that Jiang Yi was no match for Yi Xian. They knew that with Yi Xian around, the Ning kingdom wouldn't perish for the time being. In the air, the two myriad Dharma realm experts from the divine central continent stopped as well. There was no point in continuing the battle. However, the two of them and Jiang Yi didn't leave. Yi Xian couldn't be bothered with the three of them. He put away the elegant spirit sword and faced the nearby little monster Tuoba. Little monster, take our brothers and clean up the battlefield. Little monster Tuoba grinned brilliantly. All right. As she spoke, she glanced at the blue waves Dao soldiers behind her. Clean up the battlefield. Everyone bowed slightly. If they'd respected little monster Tuoba before because of Yi Xian, then now they respected her from the bottom of their hearts. This woman was truly too powerful. It could be said that without little monster Tuoba, it would have been impossible for them to end the battle so quickly. Little monster Tuoba had dealt with most of the stronger experts, and the experts from the divine central continent had been extremely wary of her. One strike to kill one. Who wouldn't be wary? In the azure firmament world, only the strong were worthy of respect. Little monster Tuoba was very proactive in cleaning up the battlefield. She'd already fallen in love with the feeling of robbing others. When Yi Xian arrived in front of Tuoba Yen, the golden insignia guards who'd been blocking Tuoba Yen's path immediately moved aside. Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian and was about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly took out a glowing scroll and handed it to her. Thunder Rush Incantation, a heaven-grade martial technique. This is for you. A heaven-grade martial technique. Tuoba Yen was stunned. Chapter 213. Heaven-grade martial skill. Not only Tuoba Yen but many people were also stunned. Even the two 10,000 Dharma realm experts behind Tuoba Yen were taken aback. A heaven-ranked martial skill was extremely rare. It was truly priceless. It should be known that the imperial family of Ning country did not have a heaven-grade martial skill even after so many years. Not to mention Ning country in the entire Qingzhou, only Kuraki Academy and Great Cloud Empire had it. But now Yi Xian just casually gave it away. This was not ordinary generosity. Tuoba Yen looked straight at Yi Xian and did not speak. Yi Xian smiled and asked, "What's wrong?" "What?" Tuoba Yen asked. "What?" Yi Xian shook his head and smiled. He placed the scroll of heaven-grade martial skill in Tuoba Yan's hand. "There's no why. Just give it to me if you like it. It's that simple." Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian for a long time. Finally, she put away the scroll of heaven-grade martial skill. At this moment, little monster Tuoba had also finished cleaning up the battlefield. She smiled and came to Yi Xian. "Little Yi, this time's harvest is not bad." Yi Xian said with a smile, "Tell me about it." Tuoba's smile became brighter and brighter. "There are 2.9 billion gold coins and more than 7 million supreme-grade spirit stones. There are 17 clear-grade weapons and 72 supreme-grade spirit artifacts. There are also a lot of miscellaneous items, but none of them are very valuable. More than 7 million top-grade spirit stones." Yi Xian nodded slightly. Although this was not as much as what he obtained in Karaki Academy, it was still a lot. Especially at this time, 7 million top-grade spirit stones was really an astonishing wealth. As if thinking of something, Yi Xian suddenly said, "Little monster, take out 1/3 and distribute it to the brothers." Little monster Tuoba glanced at the Blue Waves Dao soldiers not far behind her and immediately nodded, "Okay." As she spoke, she began to distribute. Those Blue Waves cavalrymen looked at each other in blank dismay. Obviously, they didn't expect that Yi Xian would allocate a sum of money to them. One should know that in Blue Waves Academy, they actually receive military pay every month. Not only that, Blue Waves Academy also spent a huge amount of money to provide them with martial skills, equipment, elixirs and cultivation resources. Their treatment was already very good. At this time, one of the Blue Waves cavalrymen suddenly stood up. "Dean, we have already taken enough, there is no need for these." Although they were a little tempted, they knew that they couldn't be too greedy. If he was too greedy, he might lose everything in the end. Yi Xian smiled and said, "All of you have contributed, so these are what you deserve. Not only this time but for any future missions, if there are any spoils of war, you will get 1/3 of it. The remaining 2/3 will belong to the academy." "Yes, it's decided." That cavalryman still wanted to say something, but little monster Tuoba suddenly threw a storage ring to him. "All of you have contributed previously, so this is what you deserve. There is no need to say anything more." Seeing that Yi Xian had already made up his mind, that Blue Waves cavalryman didn't say anything else. After putting away the storage ring, over 100 Blue Waves cavalrymen bowed deeply to Yi Xian, then quietly retreated to the side. At this time, Tuoba Yen suddenly asked, "Can I borrow your Dao soldiers?" Yi Xian looked at Tuoba Yen and Tuoba Yen said, "There are some experts from the Central Divine Continent in the city, ordinary soldiers can't deal with them." Yi Xian nodded, "Let your people take 50 cavalrymen to the city to clean up. You little Jiao, the two of you follow me, I have something to discuss with you." Jiang Jiao suddenly pointed at Jiang Ye's group of 3 at the distant palace gate. "What about them?" Jiang Ye's group of 3 hadn't left, but the 3 of them stayed far away and didn't dare to approach. They were truly fearful of Yi Xian's flying sword. The old woman behind Tuoba Yen suddenly said, "It's fine, the 2 of us will just keep an eye on them." Yi Xian nodded, then walked towards the distant Imperial Palace Hall with Tuoba Yen and Jiang Jiao. Little monster Tuoba didn't follow them, instead quietly sneaking out of the palace. Previously, she had heard Tuoba Yen say that there were still many experts from the Central Divine Continent in the city. How could she let go of this opportunity? In the nearby palace hall, Jiang Jiao glanced behind him. "Your friend seems to have left the palace." Yi Xian smiled, "Don't worry about her, even the myriad Dharma realm can't do anything to her. 8th on the demon level list. Let alone in the Azure province, even in the Central Divine Continent, no one would dare to provoke such a figure." Moreover, little monster Tuoba's background was obviously not simple. He wouldn't believe that she didn't have any life-saving trump cards. The doors to the hall closed, leaving only the 3 of them seated around a table. Jiang Jiao and Tuoba Yen looked at Yi Xian, and Yi Xian said in a low voice, "I want to form another Dao soldier, not an ordinary one but a super one. I don't need too many people, just 10, but they must be the best. Not only must their individual strength be the best, but the equipment they use must be the best as well." Jiang Jiao said in a low voice, "The best? You want to equip them with truth-grade equipment?" Yi Xian nodded. Tuoba Yen and Jiang Jiao exchanged a glance when they heard this, and there was a trace of shock in their eyes. Truth-grade equipment. The 2 women fell silent. Yi Xian smiled bitterly. In truth, he knew that it was slightly insane. A piece of true-grade equipment was also priceless. After all, the sword box on his back cost nearly 3 billion gold coins. He still owed Drunken Immortal over 20 million supreme-grade spirit stones. Although the things swordsmen used were more expensive, a piece of truth-grade equipment cost at least 15 million supreme-grade spirit stones. 15 million supreme-grade spirit stones. For the current situation, this was a very shocking number. Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian and said in a low voice, If we want to equip them with truth-grade spirit weapons, even if my Ning country and the Jiang country join forces, it will be difficult. Moreover, even if we do manage to do it, we will probably have to use all the strength of our countries. With the current situation, if we use all the strength of our countries, the gains might not make up for the losses, and the two countries might even be forcefully dragged down. Jiang Jiu nodded. King Tuoba is right. Truth-grade equipment is truly too precious. Yi Xian suddenly said, how about this? I will be responsible for the money, and you two can be in charge. The two women looked at Yi Xian and Jiang Jiu frowned slightly. Where are you going to get so much money? Yi Xian smiled. I have my ways. You two are responsible for choosing people for me. The Jiang country will choose 5 people, the Ning country will choose 5 people, and the Jiang country will choose 5 people. There are more, that's fine too. Little Jiu, if you want to choose people, choose from the Dao soldiers, the elites of the Dao soldiers. Yen, you choose the same people. Choose the most outstanding people of your Ning country. After you choose, I will personally test them. Only when I nod my head will they be qualified. Saying this, he placed his hands on the table and softly said, I want the elites of the elites. Although the Blue Waves Dao soldiers were not bad, it was still not enough. He needed a sharp knife that could pierce through everything. Especially in this chaotic era, he needed a super Dao soldier that could deal with anything. And this Dao soldier, he couldn't build it by himself. He needed the full support of the Ning country and the Jiang country, and also the intoxicated immortal building. Even with the support of these 3 powers, he wasn't completely sure that he could build it. But he wanted to take a gamble. Currently, even if he found 20 truth-grade swords, he still wouldn't be able to break through to 10,000 Laws realm. Because he had just reached Divine Unity realm, his realm was basically unstable. Even if he could, he didn't dare to break through to 10,000 Laws realm at this time, it was too impatient. Haste makes waste, he still understood the logic of haste. Now, the most important thing for him was to stabilize his realm, then break through to 10,000 Laws realm. And during this period he just happened to be able to develop the Dao soldiers of Blue Waves Academy and build a super Dao soldier. At this moment, Tuoba Yen suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Are you serious? Yi Xian nodded. This Azure province can't fall into chaos, at least our Jiang country and Ning country can't fall into chaos, and in order to not fall into chaos we need powerful strength. I alone am far from enough. Tuoba Yen suddenly took out a purple storage ring and placed it in front of Yi Xian. She didn't say anything. This is? Yi Xian asked. Tuoba Yen indifferently said, 30 million top-grade spirit stones. Hearing this, Yi Xian and Jiang Jiu were dumbfounded. 30 million top-grade spirit stones. Naturally, Yi Xian was somewhat shocked, because this was even more than what he obtained in Karaki Academy. As if knowing what Yi Xian was thinking, Tuoba Yen explained, my Ning country's successive kings will save a private sum of wealth. This wealth will be accumulated from generation to generation, and this wealth can only be used at the Ning country's most critical moment. Yi Xian solemnly said, this is your Ning country's life-saving money. You give it to me. Tuoba Yen glanced at Yi Xian. If not for you, Ning country would have perished long ago. However, you have to promise me as long as you are alive, Ning country will not perish. Yi Xian nodded, I promise you. Tuoba Yen nodded, no longer saying anything. At the side, Jiang Jiu suddenly said, I will also return to Jiang country and ask my imperial father to take out some top-grade spirit stones, but it may not be too much, the current Jiang country is in a bit of trouble. Yi Xian softly said, okay. Then now you can go pick people. Leave the rest to me. 15 minutes later, Jiang Jiu and Tuoba Yen left the main hall. Pick people. For the two women, what they needed to do now was to pick people. It was not a simple matter to pick 5 people from each country. Yi Xian did not leave. He waited for almost an hour, and an old man suddenly appeared in the hall. 5th floor head. Yi Xian took out a storage ring and handed it to the 5th floor head. Everything in the storage ring will be exchanged for top-grade spirit stones. The 5th floor master glanced at the storage ring, and his expression changed. Because there was a heaven-rank martial skill, close to 10 earth-rank high-rank martial skills, 2 true-rank spirit artifacts, over 30 bright-rank spirit artifacts, over 80 supreme-rank spirit artifacts, and an assortment of other spirit artifacts. This was a shocking amount of wealth. Especially the heaven-grade martial skills and truth-grade spirit artifacts. They could be sold for an astronomical price. The 5th floor head did not say anything and took the storage ring and left. After the 5th floor head left, Yi Xian entered the World Prison Pagoda and came to a corner. There, a sword was still trembling. A heaven-grade sword. After a moment of silence, Yi Xian said softly, Follow me for a year and I will return your freedom. I will keep my promise. The sword did not respond. Yi Xian turned around and left. Just when Yi Xian was about to reach the door, the heaven-grade sword suddenly trembled and let out a sword cry. Yi Xian stopped. Great Cloud Empire. A woman stood on the city wall with her hands hidden in her sleeves. 2 black phoenix claws were embroidered on her sleeves. This person was Great Cloud Empire's backer, King Lian Wanli. In front of Lian Wanli stood an elder. The elder wore a pink robe that had men and women drawn on it. These men and women were hugging each other and doing indescribable things. The old man looked at Lian Wanli with a trace of fear in his eyes, because he had just exchanged blows with the woman before him. He was defeated in a single move. The old man cupped his fists at Lian Wanli. Miss Lian, I have discussed with you about exterminating Yixian, Jiang country and Ning country. What do you think about it? Exterminate Yixian. Lian Wanli blinked. What's there to think about? There's no need to think about it. I support your all-pleasure sect a great deal. The old man was overjoyed. Really? Lian Wanli nodded seriously. Really, more real than real gold. P.S. After watching the live broadcast, I suddenly realized that I can also be a streamer. Isn't it just singing, wearing revealing clothes and shaking my butt a few times? If I become a star streamer, you guys will come to support me. I'm serious. Because being a streamer makes a lot of money, there are always tycoons who spend tens of thousands. Moreover, I think I can sing and dance. Chapter 214. Qingzhou. The spirit energy in Qingzhou was decreasing day by day. Many places had completely dried up and turned into barren lands. Many large and small cities in the Green Province had also become empty cities. All of them fled to places with spiritual qi hoping to survive. Many cities were empty, but many of them were overcrowded and overcrowded. Moreover, more and more cultivators from the divine central continent had entered Qingzhou to plunder. Qingzhou was now in an extraordinarily chaotic state. Great Cloud Empire. Lian Wanli stood quietly on the city wall of the Great Cloud Empire. Behind her stood a woman in armor with a long sword at her waist. Lian Wanli was dressed in a dark red dress that dragged on the ground. Around the dress were pieces of fiery red scales. Phoenix scales. These scales were extremely lifelike and lifelike. Lian Wanli looked into the distance. At the end of her line of sight was an endless mountain range, from which many people were desperately rushing towards the imperial capital. Because the imperial capital of the Great Cloud Empire had spirit energy. The gates of the imperial capital of the Great Cloud Empire were not closed, so these people could enter and leave freely. After a long time, Lian Wanli withdrew her gaze. Azwa, tell me about the situation. Azwa lowered her head slightly. Your Majesty, 30% of the territory of the Great Cloud Empire has completely lost spirit energy, and the remaining 30% is dissipating at an extremely fast rate. In a month at most, the spirit energy will be completely gone. She paused for a moment before continuing. In addition to this natural disaster, there is also a man-made disaster. Turmoil has broken out everywhere. Coupled with the barbaric invasion and wanton plundering of experts from the divine central continent, Qingzhou is in chaos. Lian Wanli lowered her eyes. After a moment she asked again, how are the Jiang kingdom and the Ning kingdom? Azwa said solemnly, the situation is slightly better. Yixian won a complete victory in the battle of the Ning kingdom. Now, many experts from the divine central continent do not dare to provoke him lightly. Of course, that is except for the Joyful Union sect and the Joyful sect. These two forces are determined to win over the king of the Ning kingdom, Tuoba Yen. An inner charm body? Lian Wanli asked. Azwa shook her head. It's not that simple. That woman not only has an inner charm body, but her bloodline doesn't seem simple either. Bloodline? Lian Wanli looked at Azwa. Do you know what bloodline is? Azwa shook his head. I don't know yet. Lian Wanli was about to speak when suddenly, the sound of fighting came from below the city. She turned around and saw a group of people fighting below the city wall. After a moment of silence, Lian Wanli said softly, send out 100 black flame soldiers to patrol the city day and night. If there are any troublemakers, behead them immediately and hang their heads above the city gates. In addition, send 10 imperial guards to patrol the Great Cloud territory. If anyone dares to cause trouble, kill them on the spot. Azwa was alarmed by Lian Wanli's words. The king's imperial guard was the most mysterious and strongest army in Great Cloud Empire. She was a member of the king's guards. However, she had never known of the existence of others, and the others had never known of her existence. Not only that, she did not know how many people there were in the king's imperial guards. In the entire Great Cloud Empire, Lien Wanli was the only one who knew about this mysterious army, which only obeyed his orders. Meanwhile, Lien Wanli suddenly said, "Prepare a cloud ship for this king." Oswo was taken aback. "Where is His Majesty going?" Lien Wanli said with a smile, "I promised Union Sect to help them eliminate Yi Xian. This king is not a person who goes back on his word." Speaking of this, she seemed to have thought of something and a fox-like smile appeared on her lips. Oswo lowered her head slightly. She knew that her king must be up to something bad again. Ning country. Outside the capital of the Ning kingdom, Jiang Yi and two experts of the 10,000 Laws realm stood respectfully. In front of the three of them stood an old man. The old man wore a pink robe and exuded a pungent fragrance. This person was the vice sect master of Union Sect. No one knew his name and only called him Old Man Union. Old Man Union glanced at Jiang Ye's shoulder. "Is that Yi Xian really just a divine unity realm expert?" Jiang Yi nodded. "Yes, but his battle strength is at least top 10 on the monster list." Top 10 on the monster list. Old Man Union's eyes narrowed slightly, and there was a trace of seriousness in them. "Does he have any backing?" Jiang Yi spoke solemnly. "Supposedly, there is a sword immortal." A sword immortal. Old Man Union suddenly turned to look at Jiang Yi. "Is that true?" Jiang Yi hesitated for a moment and said, "It should be true. Otherwise, it would be absolutely impossible for him to go against Karaki Academy. However, I asked Karaki Academy just now, and the dean said that the sword immortal was heavily injured by them and fled. Now Karaki Academy is pursuing her." Old Man Union instantly heaved a sigh of relief. "That's good." When he spoke up to this point, he seemed to have thought of something and asked, "Then why hasn't Karaki Academy eliminated Yi Xian?" Jiang Yi thought for a moment and said, "According to my inference, the firmament world has suffered a sudden upheaval, and the spirit energy in it has dried up. So, Karaki Academy has no time to care about Pine Prefecture. Now they only want to stabilize the situation in the Central Divine Prefecture, so they don't have the energy to care about Yi Xian." Old Man Union nodded. "That makes sense." When he spoke up to this point, he raised his head and gazed at the nearby capital of the Kingdom of Peace, and there was a burning desire in his eyes. That woman doesn't just possess the inner charm physique, her bloodline is the Een spirit bloodline that my joyful Union Sect dreams of obtaining. That bloodline has to be suppressed with extremely overbearing aphrodisiacs since a young age. Since she was able to survive until now, there's definitely a huge amount of yang flames accumulated within her. If I'm able to dual cultivate with her and devour her bloodline. Old Man Union's hands trembled slightly when he spoke up to this point. However, he seemed to have thought of something and gradually calmed down once more. After a short moment of silence, Old Man Union spoke solemnly. "The sect master has said that we must obtain this woman. He'll immediately rush over once he's finished dealing with the matters in the Central Divine Prefecture. If he obtains this woman, then the sect master will definitely rise to greater heights. At that time, my joyful Union Sect status in the Devil Path will definitely rise greatly." Jiang Yi spoke solemnly. "Be careful of the Merry Gate. They haven't done anything lately, but they definitely won't miss such a rare opportunity." Old Man Union nodded. "The sect master will need at least 2 days to arrive in Azure Province. We can't wait that long. Once Great Cloud Empire's King Reliance Wanli arrives, we'll immediately rush into the city, kill Yi Xian and capture that woman alive." That sword immortal. Jiang Yi was somewhat apprehensive. Old Man Union spoke indifferently. "It doesn't matter. Even if she escapes Karaki Academy's pursuit, she won't dare appear in front of the sect master. She's just an injured sword immortal. The sect master can destroy her with a flick of his finger." Jiang Yi nodded. "That's true." After saying that, his expression suddenly turned ferocious. "If we capture that Yi Xian, please hand him over to me. This old man will make him wish he was dead." Old Man Union glanced at Jiang Yi. "When the time comes, it's up to you." Ning Empire's imperial capital, World Prison Pagoda. Yi Xian sat cross-legged on the ground. A sword floated in front of him. The sword was 4 feet long and 2 fingers wide. The sword's entire body emitted a faint cold light. An unknown beast was drawn on the sword hilt. The beast's eyes were wide open and its expression was ferocious. Heaven-grade sword. A true heaven-grade treasure. Yi Xian held the sword hilt with his right hand. The sword trembled slightly but didn't resist. However, the spiritual energy in his body was depleting at an extremely fast speed. Moreover, the exquisite sword was trembling violently. This was a sign that it sensed danger. Sure enough, this sword wasn't something that the exquisite sword could contend against at the moment. It wasn't something that he could fully control at the moment. Yi Xian quickly let go of the sword. In this short period of time, the sword had already depleted 1/3 of the profound qi in his body. With his current strength he could only use this sword 3 times at most. After 3 times, the spiritual energy in his body would definitely be depleted. As though he thought of something, Yi Xian quickly took out his sword case. Under his signal, the sword went straight into the sword case. The sword case trembled violently for a moment but quickly calmed down. About 15 minutes later, a smile appeared at the corner of Yi Xian's mouth because he realized that if he used this sword case, he could use the flying sword 5 times. 5 times. With his current strength, coupled with the true grade sword case and the heaven grade sword, as well as his own sword force and sword intent, there was a high chance that he could instantly kill a myriad Dharma realm practitioner. Of course, if the other party was fully on guard, it would be a little difficult. Of course, if one strike didn't work, he would use another. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly left the prison pagoda. In the main hall, Tuoba Yen walked in and walked up to Yi Xian. "They're here." Yi Xian nodded slightly. "Leave everything to me." With that, he walked out of the main hall. Behind him, Tuoba Yen stared at Yi Xian's back in a daze. After Yi Xian walked out of the main hall, there were 5 people standing in the sky in the distance. All 5 of them were at the myriad Dharma realm, and he knew 2 of them. They were Jiang Yi and Lian Wanli, whom he'd severed an arm earlier. Yi Xian's face instantly sank when he saw Lian Wanli. What does this crazy woman want? In the air, Old Man Concord glanced at Yi Xian and was about to attack when he suddenly looked to the right. "I wonder who's from the joyful sect." As soon as Old Man Concord finished speaking, 3 old men suddenly appeared on the right. All of them were at the myriad Dharma realm. Old Man Concord's gaze descended onto the gray-robed old man in the lead, and his eyes narrowed slightly. "Ku Xiaodan, I didn't expect you to come in person." Ku Xiaodan, the Grand Elder of the Joyful Sect, the second in command of the Joyful Sect. The old man called Ku Xiaotian grinned. "How could my Joyful Sect let go of such a seductive woman?" As he spoke, his gaze shifted to Tuoba Yen below, and there was a trace of excitement in his eyes. "She really is an inner seductive body. Even in the divine central continent, it's rare to see one. I didn't expect it to appear in this tiny azure province." Old Man Concord said indifferently, "My joyful sect wants this woman." Ku Xiaotian laughed. "My joyful sect will never let her go." Old Man Concord was about to speak when the sword box behind Yi Xian shook violently. Then a sword soared into the sky. Buzz! A sword's cry tore through the sky, resounding through the clouds. In the air, Old Man Concord and Ku Xiaotian's expressions changed drastically, and they both retreated rapidly. Jiang Yi was just a little bit slower, and just that little bit caused his head to fly off. The entire place instantly fell silent. Below, Yi Xian opened his left hand, and the heaven-grade sword appeared in his hand. He took out a silk handkerchief with his right hand and gently wiped the blood off the sword. He shook his head as he wiped. "So the myriad Dharma realm is so weak. I only used 30% of my strength." As he spoke, he looked up at Old Man Concord and the others in the air. "Why did you stop? Come, let's continue the discussion. Everyone." Chapter 215. In the sky, Old Man Concord and the others wore grave expressions. The Dharma realm. Although Jiang Yi was injured, he was still in the Dharma realm. However, he was instantly killed by Yi Xian. That was an instant kill. And Yi Xian was only in the divine combination realm. At this moment, no one dared to look down on Yi Xian anymore. It would be foolish to look down on him at this moment. In the field, Lian Wanli's expression was calm. She merely glanced at the sword in Yi Xian's hand. A heaven-grade sword. Such a treasure was rare even in the Great Cloud Empire. She seemed to have thought of something, and the corners of her mouth lifted slightly. No one knew what she was planning. At this moment, Old Man Concord and the others also noticed the sword in Yi Xian's hand. Their expressions instantly turned grave when they saw it. A heaven-grade sword. Such a treasure was very, very rare even in the central divine continent. For a swordsman to obtain such a treasure, especially a heaven-grade sword, it was like adding wings to a tiger. Old Man Huan glanced coldly at Yi Xian, then looked at Lian Wanli. "Miss Lian, this person's strength is extraordinary. We need to join forces so that we can kill him in one strike and not give him any chances. What do you think?" Lian Wanli nodded seriously. "Okay, I support you." Old Man Concord smiled. "That's good." Then he looked at Ku Xiaotian on the right. Let's work together to get rid of Yi Xian first. As for the fate of the seductive woman, let's put it aside for now. What do you think? Ku Xiaotian glanced at Yi Xian and pondered for a moment before nodding. Okay. Old man Concord looked at Yi Xian with a cold expression. Old man, let's see how monstrous you are. As soon as he finished speaking, he charged toward Yi Xian. Behind him, the three 10,000 Laws realm experts also rushed down. On the other side, Ku Xiaotian and the others also made their moves. 7 Dharma realm experts. Such a lineup was undoubtedly extremely terrifying in the Qingzhou region. On the other hand, Yi Xian was only at the divine combination realm. Yi Xian's face was expressionless as he lightly tapped the sword in his hand against his palm. When Old Man Concord was several feet above his head, he suddenly raised his sword and slashed upwards. Boom. Along with the sound of an explosion, Old Man Concord was instantly forced back several dozen feet, while Yi Xian was forced back more than 500 feet. With this retreat, he had already retreated into the main hall. However, Ku Xiaotian and the others had already arrived. Boom. An explosion sounded like a clap of thunder. In an instant, the hall that Yi Xian was in collapsed. And in the instant that it collapsed, Yi Xian retreated explosively. But Old Man Concord and the others were even faster, arriving in front of him in an instant. At this time, 8 figures suddenly rushed over from the side, their speed extremely fast. Boom 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 boom. Along with the deafening sound of explosions, Old Man Concord and the others had already retreated hundreds of feet away. At this moment there were 8 people standing in front of Yi Xian. These people were incomparably familiar to Yi Xian. The previous ruler of Jiang country, Jiang Yuetian, Feng Lan, Mo Yuan, the 6th, 7th and 8th floor masters of Drunken Immortal Inn, as well as the 2 Dharma realm experts who had been guarding Tuoba Yen. 8 Dharma realm experts. Seeing Jiang Yuetian and the others, Old Man Concord's expression instantly turned gloomy. Who are you? Why are you interfering in the matters of my Joyous Union sect and Joyous Gate? Jiang Yuetian said indifferently, we will advance and retreat together with little friend Yi Xian. With one sentence he made his stand clear. Given the current situation in Qingzhou for Jiang Yuetian and Drunken Immortal Inn, everyone naturally had to stick together. As for Feng Lan and Mo Yuan, they had already placed their hopes on Yi Xian. Naturally, they didn't want anything to happen to Yi Xian. Moreover, they were now members of Blue Waves Academy. If they didn't take action now, how could they establish themselves in Blue Waves Academy in the future? Thus, after receiving Yi Xian's sound transmission, they immediately rushed over. Yi Xian walked in front of Old Man Concord and the others. Everyone, I Yi Xian have no enmity with any of you. I don't want to form a life or death enmity with any of you. Now if you leave, everything will be fine. How about that? Old Man Concord sneered. Sure. But before that, you have to hand over that seductive woman, otherwise. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly turned to Jiang Yuetian and the others. Kill, leave no one alive. As soon as he finished speaking, he had already rushed in front of Old Man Concord with his sword in hand. Without any superfluous words, he slashed down with his sword. One sword to decide life and death. This sword strike was a strike with all of his strength. Sword force, sword intent, and one sword to decide life and death. Especially now that the sword was a heaven rank sword, this sword could be said to be the strongest sword he had ever used. Sensing the power of Yi Xian's sword, Old Man Concord's complexion changed greatly. He suddenly pulled his hands to both sides and a pink shield suddenly appeared in front of him. At the same time, a powerful force and aura burst out of his body. Bang! As Yi Xian's sword fell, the pink shield in front of Old Man Concord exploded with a loud bang. The power and aura released by Old Man Concord were also shattered by the sword in an instant. The powerful force instantly sent Old Man Concord flying hundreds of feet away. Just as Old Man Concord stopped, the ground under his feet instantly cracked. Not only that, the powerful force unceasingly fluctuated in all directions through his feet. In an instant, the ground within a radius of 300 meters around him cracked layer by layer. At the same time that Yi Xian forced Old Man Concord back with his sword, he also retreated more than 60 meters. The rest of the people had already started fighting with Jiang Yuetian and the others. However, there was one person who did not make a move. Lian Wanli. From the beginning until the end she did not make a move. She just stood there and chatted with someone. Little Demon Tuoba. The 2 women were chatting passionately. Old Man Concord wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth. At this moment his internal organs were injured. Not only that, but his arms had also split open. The gashes were so large that his bones could be seen. Old Man Concord turned to look at Lian Wanli, who was chatting passionately nearby. His face was extremely gloomy. "Miss Lien, why didn't you make a move?" Hearing Old Man Concord's words, Lien Wanli turned to look at him in shock. "Why should I make a move?" Old Man Concord clenched his fists. "Miss Lien, you promised the old man that you would support him with all your strength." Lien Wanli nodded. "That's right. However, I didn't say that I would help you." Then she said very seriously, "I did say that I would support you with all my strength, but I only supported you in spirit. I supported you in spirit." Old Man Concord was so angry that he spat out a mouthful of blood. He stared resentfully at Lien Wanli. He knew that he had been played by this woman. However, he could not figure out why this woman would play a trick on him. After all, if he destroyed Yishan and got rid of the Ning Kingdom and the Jiang Kingdom, then the Great Cloud Empire would truly become the strongest power in Qingzhou. Moreover, the Great Cloud Empire would become the Concord sect's ally. He really could not figure out why Lien Wanli would do this. In fact, he did not know that Lien Wanli favored Yishan more. Because the powers of the Divine Central Continent wanted to plunder and destroy Qingzhou, and just like her, Yishan wanted to protect this place. Allying with the Concord sect was undoubtedly like asking a tiger for its skin. Old Man Concord wanted to say something, but at this moment, Yishan had already rushed in front of him with a sword in hand and slashed down again. This sword strike was stronger than the previous one. Old Man Concord's expression changed drastically. Without thinking, he turned around and fled. He was so fast that he disappeared from Yishan's sight in the blink of an eye. Seeing Old Man Concord flee, Yishan was stunned. Ran away. Just like that? On the other side, Ku Xiaotian and the others did not hesitate to turn around and flee after seeing Old Man Concord flee. They were all experts of the Dharma realm. If they wanted to flee, Jiang Yuetian and the others could do nothing to them. They could only watch helplessly as Ku Xiaotian and the others fled. Yishan could not continue to attack. He had just launched 3 sword strikes, and his current combat strength was less than 20%. Although he had won, Yishan's expression was still solemn. Because he knew that the Concord sect and the Laughing sect would definitely make a comeback, and they might even bring other forces and more experts with them. And the next time they came, it would definitely be a fierce battle. They could not passively take a beating. If this continued, the other party would always have the upper hand. If they could win, they would fight. If they couldn't, they would run. They would be exhausted to death. After a moment of silence, Yishan turned around to face Lien Wanli. Lien Wanli's lips curled into a charming smile. "Congratulations on reaching the Divine Union realm." Yishan asked, "Together?" Lien Wanli's smile widened. "All right." Yishan nodded. "Follow me, let's discuss this in detail." After saying that, he turned around and walked towards the hall not far away. On the other hand, Lien Wanli held little demon Tuoba's little hand and followed them. Along the way, the 2 girls chatted non-stop. Watching Yishan and the others leave, Jiang Yuetian shook his head and smiled. "Little friend, Yishan's strength has really improved by leaps and bounds. This kind of cultivation speed is really embarrassing." Feng Lan and Mo Yuan looked at each other with a trace of a smile in their eyes. The more outstanding Yishan was, the better it was for them. As if thinking of something, Feng Lan suddenly said, "Brother Mo, please make a trip to the Learning Cliff ruins and collect some talent. It's time to upgrade the 12 golden men." Mo Yuan hesitated for a moment before nodding. "All right." Soon the 2 turned around and left. On the other side, the 6th floor master glanced in the direction that Old Man Concord and the others had escaped to. "These people will definitely come back. From now on, send out all the scouts of my drunken immortal house to keep track of their whereabouts." The 7th floor master nodded slightly. "I'll handle it personally." Soon the crowd dispersed. Thousands of miles away from the Ning country's imperial city, Old Man Concord and the others stopped. Seeing that Yishan and the others did not chase after them, they immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Old Man Concord's face was terrifyingly gloomy. "I never thought that Yishan would be so monstrous." Not far away, Ku Xiaotian said in a low voice, "This person's strength is too monstrous. It's difficult for us to eliminate him." Old Man Concord was silent for a moment. "Call for reinforcements." Ku Xiaotian looked at Old Man Concord. Old Man Concord said coldly, "The Divine Central Continent has no lack of monstrous geniuses." Ku Xiaotian shook his head. "It's difficult to invite the top 10 monstrous geniuses of the monstrous ranking." Old Man Concord said indifferently, "Have you heard of the Northern Chill Saintess?" Ku Xiaotian Tendo said, "Of course, this person is the youngest monstrous genius of the Divine Central Continent. Why can your Joyful Union sect invite her?" Old Man Concord said in a low voice, "The Northern Chill sect owes the previous sect master of my Joyful Union sect a favor. If my Joyful Union sect uses this favor to invite her, it shouldn't be too much of a problem." At this point, his expression was somewhat ferocious. "I don't believe that Yi Xian is more monstrous than the Northern Chill Saintess. P.S. Recently I've been dreaming that I've written books for tens of millions of people. Everyone, if I continue to struggle, do you think I'll become famous one day? To be honest, I'm a little uncertain, and a little panicked." Chapter 216. In the hall. There were only two people in the hall, Yi Xian and Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli picked up the teacup in front of her and took a sip. After a while she shook her head. "It's bitter and bitter. It's an inferior tea." With that she put down the teacup. Yi Xian smiled. "Miss Lian, I feel very close to you this time." "What's that saying again?" "All right, a day apart feels like 3 autumns." Lian Wanli sized up Yi Xian. "I haven't seen you in a few days, and besides your strength, your eloquence has also improved." Yi Xian wanted to say something, but Lian Wanli said indifferently, "Let's get straight to the point." Yi Xian nodded and said seriously, "Tell me what you think." Lian Wanli dipped his finger into the tea, then drew a circle on the table. "Because of your master, the entire firmament world has undergone a huge change, especially our Azure province. Our source has been greatly damaged, and the spirit chi in the various places is disappearing at an extremely fast speed." At this point she pointed to many small dots on the circle. "Besides that, there's one more thing. After entering Azure Prefecture, those people from the Divine Central Continent have committed all sorts of crimes and plundered madly. These people are individually strong and they're scattered, so it's difficult to completely eradicate them. If we want to save Azure Prefecture, we have to start from 2 sides. First, find the spirit vein and restore Azure Prefecture's origin. Second, pacify the people and eliminate the enemy." Yi Xian was slightly surprised because he hadn't expected Lian Wanli to want to save the entire Azure Prefecture. As if she knew what Yi Xian was thinking, Lian Wanli said indifferently, "The greater the ability, the greater the responsibility. In Azure Prefecture, besides my great cloud empire, the strongest person is you, Yi Xian. You have the state of Jiang, the state of Ning, and the drunken immortal pavilion behind you. If we don't do anything, Azure Prefecture will become hell on earth in a month at most." "Hell on earth?" Yi Xian was silent, and his face was slightly gloomy because Lian Wanli was right. If he hadn't come to the Ning Kingdom would have become a living hell. If those experts from the Divine Central Continent entered the city, they would surely unleash the darkest side of their hearts. Human nature? In this chaotic world, many people had lost their humanity. Lian Wanli looked at Yi Xian, waiting for Yi Xian's reply. Her right hand was gripping the teacup tightly. At this time Yi Xian suddenly shook his head. There was a trace of disappointment in Lian Wanli's eyes when she saw Yi Xian shake his head. She let go of the teacup and was about to leave. However, Yi Xian suddenly said, "I think that just relying on me and the Great Cloud Empire isn't enough. We need to unite all the people in Qing province, such as the state of Yu, the state of Chu, and the other countries, as well as the rogue cultivators. Everyone must join hands and work together. Only then can we restore peace to Qing province." Yi Xian had never thought of saving the world. All along he had only wanted to protect the people around him. But now he was very clearly aware that if he only thought about protecting himself, then it wouldn't just be selfish, it would be foolish as well. Because if he didn't help others while it was still within his ability, then he would realize one day that no one would help him after everyone else had died. When he thought up to here, a strand of sword intent suddenly surged out from within Yi Xian. Kindness sword intent. Yi Xian was stunned. Because he hadn't released it on his own, but it had come out of him on its own. More and more sword intent filled the hall, and it didn't take long for the entire hall to be covered by it. The sword intent was like a white mist that could be clearly sensed. It was material. Lian Wanli took a deep glance at Yi Xian. If this continues, then Yi Xian will attain the Sword Emperor realm. It didn't take long for the sword intent to drift out of the hall. But right at this moment, Lian Wanli waved her right hand. "This chapter isn't finished. Please continue to the next page." Bang. The sword intent that had just spread out of the hall instantly dispersed. It wasn't just the sword intent outside the hall that had dispersed, even the sword intent within the hall had been completely swept away. Yi Xian looked at Lian Wanli and the latter said indifferently, "You aren't the Sword Emperor, yet your sword intent is material. I presume it's because of your sword Dao. It's best not to reveal too many of your trump cards before you possess absolute strength." Yi Xian nodded, "I understand." As he spoke, he opened up his palm, and there was a ball of sword intent within it. At this moment, he noticed that the greater his kindness intent was, the stronger this kindness sword intent would be. Now, this kindness sword intent was at least 20% stronger than before. Actually, he was really curious about the malicious intent sword intent now, because the mysterious woman had told him that the might of the malicious intent sword intent was even stronger. Meanwhile, Lien Wanli suddenly asked in a light voice, "You said that you'd unite everyone in the Azure Prefecture?" Yi Xian withdrew his sword intent and nodded. "Don't underestimate these people. Perhaps they aren't particularly strong, but if they unite, they'll still be a force to be reckoned with. Moreover, if we don't unite them, it's very likely that they'll join the experts of the Divine Central Continent in stirring up trouble. At that time, the situation will become even more difficult to deal with." Lien Wanli nodded slightly. "That makes sense." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian. "I've already sent people to search for spirit veins and find out where the quintessence of the Azure Prefecture is. As long as we have enough spirit veins, we can repair the quintessence of the Azure Prefecture." Yi Xian said in a low voice, "Roughly how many spirit veins do we need?" Lien Wanli looked directly at Yi Xian. "At least 100 supreme-grade spirit veins." Yi Xian was stunned. 100 supreme-grade spirit veins? He only had one right now. And this one was an extremely rare existence in the entire Azure Prefecture. 100? Where could he get them? Lien Wanli suddenly laughed. "I was just kidding." "Yi Xian." Lien Wanli suddenly took out a storage ring and placed it on the table. "This thing is for you." With that, she turned and left. After Lien Wanli left, Yi Xian picked up the storage ring. When he saw what was inside, he was stunned. A true rank sword. A total of 3 swords. Yi Xian took the storage ring and walked out of the hall. At this moment, Lien Wanli had already vanished. This woman was actually this generous? Yi Xian was slightly puzzled. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. The 5th floor master. The 5th floor master pointed with a finger, and a storage ring appeared in front of Yi Xian. "Young friend, I've sold all the items you entrusted me with. They're all in this storage ring. There's a total of 650 million supreme-grade spirit stones. 650 million supreme-grade spirit stones." Yi Xian's hand couldn't help but tremble. The 5th floor master smiled. "Don't underestimate a heaven-rank martial technique. This kind of thing is very rare even in the Divine Central Continent." Yi Xian nodded. He took out a storage ring and handed it to the 5th floor master. "These are the supreme-grade spirit stones I owe the Drunken Immortal restaurant." The 5th floor master did not refuse. He immediately put away the storage ring. As if thinking of something, his expression darkened. "Young friend, according to the information the old man received, Blue Billow Continent is in chaos. In a month at most, Blue Billow Continent may become a dead continent. When that time comes, the experts of the Divine Central Continent will most likely come to Azure Continent. Not only that, but the Divine Central Continent itself has also begun to fall into chaos. Many people who can't survive there will most likely come to Azure Continent. And the Realm Defense Alliance should have already abandoned Azure Continent and Blue Billow Continent." At this point, he looked at Yi Xian. "Young friend, if you can't let go of the Jiang Nation, the Ning Nation, and Blue Billow Academy, please make plans early." Yi Xian said solemnly. "This chapter is not finished. Please continue." "How did Blue Billow Continent become like this?" The 5th floor master smiled bitterly. "Not only did the most powerful forces there not protect Blue Billow Continent, but they also took the initiative to plunder local resources. Compared to the people of the Divine Central Continent, they are even worse. Especially Blue Billow Academy, they are the richest. After plundering the resources, Blue Billow Academy immediately brought their elite disciples back to the Divine Central Continent." At this point, he glanced at Yi Xian. "If Young Friend and the Great Cloud Empire are in the same situation, I believe that Azure Continent will become a dead continent in half a month at most." Clearly he was testing Yi Xian. Yi Xian smiled. "Don't worry, senior. Although I, Yi Xian, am greedy at times, I still have a bottom line." The 5th floor master nodded slightly. The old man knows Young Friend's character. At this time, Yi Xian handed the storage ring given to him by the 5th floor master. "Senior, this storage ring contains 500 million supreme-grade spiritual stones. I would like to ask Senior to purchase a batch of truth-grade spiritual weapons, armors and weapons. In short, as long as it is suitable, I will accept it." The 5th floor master glanced at Yi Xian and did not ask any questions. After putting away the storage ring, he nodded. The old man will look for young friend in 5 days. With that he turned and left. After the 5th floor master left, Yi Xian returned to the main hall and entered the prison pagoda. He took out the 3 swords given to him by Lian Wanli and devoured them without hesitation. It was not to break through to the next realm but to stabilize it. After reaching the Divine Unity realm, he found that he still had some shortcomings in the battle with the Dharma realm. The most obvious one was that his realm was a little unstable and he could not use his sword skills with ease. His strength in all aspects had increased too much compared to when he was at the Nether Passage realm, and he did not have the time to adapt to it. Thus, he had not been able to fully display his battle strength when he fought Old Man Concord. Otherwise he could have killed Old Man Concord directly. What he needed to do now was to stabilize his realm and adapt to the Divine Unity realm. The Divine Central Continent. After Old Man Concord returned to the Divine Central Continent, the entire Joyful Union sect was shocked. Because no one in the Joyful Union sect had expected that Old Man Concord would be heavily injured by Yi Xian. In the end, the Joyful Union sect decided to ask for help because the sect master of the Joyful Union sect could not leave the Divine Central Continent for now. If the Joyful Union sect did not have an expert to stand guard, it was very likely that it would be wiped out in one fell swoop. After all, the Divine Central Continent was in quite a mess right now. Thus, after Old Man Concord recovered from his injuries, he immediately represented the Joyful Union sect and headed to the Frost North sect. The Frost North sect was a first-rate power in the Divine Central Continent. Coupled with its unique geographical location, most powers in the Divine Central Continent would not easily provoke the Frost North sect. Especially now that the Frost North sect had produced a Frost North Holy Maiden, the Frost North sect's prestige in the Divine Central Continent had risen greatly. The Frost North Holy Maiden. She was the most monstrous genius in the Divine Central Continent, and she was now ranked 5th on the genius ranking. This time, Old Man Concord's goal in coming to the Frost North sect was precisely this Frost North Holy Maiden. To ask for the help of the entire Frost North sect for a favor was obviously a fool's dream, but if he only asked for one person's help, then it would not be a problem at all. Old Man Concord stood silently in the Frost North Palace. The air around him was so cold that even he felt a little cold. After an unknown period of time, a beautiful woman appeared not too far away from Old Man Concord. Old Man Concord hurriedly bowed slightly, then took out a jade pendant and handed it to the beautiful woman. The beautiful woman took the jade pendant and glanced at it. After a while, she looked at Old Man Concord. "What is it?" Old Man Concord bowed slightly again. "I would like to ask the Frost North Holy Maiden to help my Joyful Union sect kill someone in Azure Province." End of this chapter. Chapter 217. Azure Prefecture? The beautiful woman's beautiful brows knit together slightly. That barbaric land? Old Man Concord nodded slightly. Exactly. The beautiful woman spoke indifferently. "According to what I heard, your Joyful Union sect dispatched a large number of disciples to Azure Prefecture. I presume that your Joyful Union sect's gains were great." Old Man Concord smiled bitterly. "What could a barbaric land like Azure Prefecture have? My Joyful Union sect is heading to Azure Prefecture to gather some talents and bring them back to the Central Divine Prefecture to be fostered. That's all." The beautiful woman naturally didn't believe Old Man Concord's nonsense. However, she couldn't be bothered to deal with such trivial matters, so she immediately said, "My Frost North sect naturally recognizes the favor we owe you. However, if you want to invite the Saintess, that will depend on her own opinion. To Azure Prefecture?" Meanwhile, an icy cold voice suddenly resounded from the side. Old Man Concord turned around. A young girl around the age of 13 or 14 had suddenly appeared not too far away from him. The young girl wore an icy dress, and her entire body emanated bone-piercing coldness. The Frost North Saintess. Old Man Concord bowed slightly. "Greetings, Saintess." Not only was this young girl an extremely monstrous genius, she was also the Frost North Saintess, and the Frost North Saintess was the next sect master of the Frost North sect. Moreover, the status of the Frost North sect in the Devil Path was much higher than that of the Joyful Union sect. The young girl walked over to Old Man Concord. "To Azure Prefecture?" Old Man Concord hurriedly nodded. "Yes. Azure Prefecture." The young girl's hand that was hidden in her sleeve trembled. She lowered her head slightly so that no one could see her expression. Old Man Concord thought that the young girl didn't want to go, so he hurriedly withdrew a spatial ring and passed it to the young girl. This is a small gift that my joyful union sect has prepared for your highness the saintess. I hope that your highness the saintess will accept it." The young girl received the spatial ring and saw that there were 50 million top-grade spirit stones within it. 50 million. I can buy Big Brother a mid-grade truth rank sword with that. A slight smile arose on the corners of the young girl's mouth. She put the spatial ring away, and then she looked at Old Man Concord. "I'll go with you." Old Man Hahuan was overjoyed. With the addition of the Northern Chill Saintess, killing Yi Xian wouldn't be difficult at all. As long as they killed Yi Xian, the Acacia sect would be able to obtain the Inner Charm Woman. And as long as they obtained the Inner Charm Woman, the strength of the Acacia sect's sect master would increase greatly. At that time, the status of the Acacia sect in the Devil Path would be greatly improved. Moreover, with the addition of the Northern Chill Holy Maiden, it meant that the Hahuan sect had the backing of the Frigid North sect. Killing two birds with one stone. Just like that, Old Man Hahuan left with the Northern Chill Holy Girl. Other than the Northern Chill Holy Lady, the Northern Chill sect had also sent two 10,000 Dharma realms and one Dharma defensive realm to follow them. It could be said that the Northern Chill Holy Lady was the future of the Northern Chill clan. They would not let anything happen to her. On the cloud ship, the little girl exuding a cold aura stared ahead. She seemed to be in a daze. In her right hand, she held a small wooden figurine that had already become an ice sculpture. He was eager to return home. Under the little girl's signal, the cloud ship sped up. Ning Country. In the World Prison Pagoda, after an unknown period of time, Yi Xian suddenly took a deep breath. A formless aura rippled around his body, but it quickly disappeared. Comfortable. That was what he was feeling now. His entire body felt extremely comfortable. As if he had thought of something, he suddenly opened his palm. A ray of sword light flashed past, and the Spirit Elegant Sword appeared in his hand. At that moment, the Spirit Elegant Sword had been upgraded from True Grade Middle Grade to True Grade High Grade. Now, it could be said that the Spirit Elegant Sword had reached the bottleneck of the Spirit Elegant Sword. If it wanted to upgrade again, it would be as difficult as ascending to the heavens. Because now, not only did he have to devour the sword, he also needed the Spirit Elegant Sword to transform. If it could not transform, it would be useless no matter how many True Grade swords it devoured. As if he had thought of something, he suddenly, "This chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page." He took out the sword case. Inside the sword case was the Heaven Grade Sword. It had to be said that there was still a huge gap between the current Spirit Elegant Sword and this Heaven Grade Sword. If he devoured this Heaven Grade Sword now, not only would he be devoured, the Spirit Elegant Sword would definitely be devoured as well. Unfortunately, this Heaven Grade Sword did not have a high degree of integration with him. Although he was able to activate the sword now, he had not fully unleashed the true power of the sword. Otherwise, with his current strength and a Heaven rank sword, it would be a piece of cake for him to kill a 10,000 Laws Realm cultivator. He had thought of subduing this sword, but this sword was very arrogant and did not pay any attention to him. Even though it was arrogant, this sword was very trustworthy. After it left the prison pagoda, it could have escaped, but it did not choose to escape. Instead, it chose to stay. The Heaven Grade Sword actually had its own consciousness, and it might even be able to come into contact with some so-called Tao. In any case, to him, it was definitely a good thing that this sword did not run away. As for whether he could finally subdue this sword, he did not insist on it. If he could, it would be his fortune. If he couldn't, it would be his fate. A moment later, Yi Xian put away the sword case and sword, and left the prison pagoda. As soon as he left the prison pagoda, the Great Hall's door suddenly opened, and Jiang Jiu hurriedly ran in. She ran in front of Yi Xian and looked straight at Yi Xian. Something has happened in the Jiang country. Yi Xian frowned. What happened? Jiang Jiu said fiercely, some mysterious people have charged into the Jiang country's hinterland. Wherever they passed, no one was left alive. Two World City has already been slaughtered. At this point, Jiang Jiu slowly clenched her fists and her eyes were cold. Slaughtered? Yi Xian said in a low voice, come, let's go take a look. Before long, the two of them left the Ning country on a cloud ship. The Ning country was not far from the Jiang country. In less than an hour, the two of them arrived at Two World City. As soon as Yi Xian and Jiang Jiu walked to the city gate, a monstrous smell of blood assaulted their nostrils, causing them to vomit. Yi Xian's face sank and he led Jiang Jiu into the city. The ground beneath their feet was covered in blood, and it flowed out incessantly like a small stream. The two of them walked along the street and corpses could be seen everywhere in the city. There were corpses of the elderly and children, and all of them had a single similarity. All of them had a bloody hole in their chests. Jiang Jiu walked over to one of the corpses and inspected it, and then she turned around to look at Yi Xian. Their hearts are gone. Yi Xian fell silent for a moment before he said, "Let's go and see if there are any survivors." As soon as he finished speaking, the two of them continued forward. The further they went, the more shocked they became. Because there were truly too many corpses. The streets on both sides were covered in corpses, and it was a horrifying sight. Jiang Jiu was once the marshal of the Jiang country and she'd killed many. However, she'd never slaughtered a city like this. Yet now, someone had actually slaughtered a city, and they didn't even spare the elderly, women and children. Jiang Jiu gripped her spear tightly in her right hand, and her expression was rather savage. These were the citizens of the Jiang country. It didn't take long for the two of them to arrive at the city governor's estate. At this moment, it was deathly silent within the estate. Corpses were piled up everywhere, and the air was filled with an extremely dense smell of blood. At the entrance of the estate, Yi Xian stopped and shook his head. "There are no survivors." "Wait." As he spoke, he suddenly turned around. A man in blood-red clothes was standing over 30 m away from him, and in his right hand was a little girl around the age of 10. The little girl's face was filled with terror, and her tiny hands were clinging tightly to the man's hand as she cried and begged incessantly. The man in blood-red clothes stared fixedly at Yi Xian. "The blood sect is handling matters. Unrelated people should get lost." "The blood sect?" Jiang Jiu stared at the man in blood-red clothes, and her right hand gripped her spear tightly, causing it to tremble. Yi Xian slowly walked towards the man in blood-red clothes, and when the little girl saw Yi Xian, it was as if she had seen her savior. She stretched out her tiny hands towards Yi Xian and pleaded, Brother, save her." "This chapter is not over, please continue to the next page." "I'm afraid." Yi Xian took out a golden card. "Friend, there are 1,000,000 supreme grade spirit stones in this card. How about exchanging it for this little girl's life?" 1,000,000 supreme grade spirit stones. In this era where spiritual energy was thin, 1,000,000 supreme grade spirit stones could be said to be a considerable amount of wealth. The man in blood-red clothes glanced at the golden card in Yi Xian's hand, and then looked at Yi Xian with narrowed eyes. 1,000,000 supreme grade spirit stones for the life of this lowly ant? Yi Xian said softly, "You're not losing out, are you?" The man in blood-red clothes stared straight at Yi Xian. "Give me a reason." Yi Xian fell silent. In his body, the spirit elegant sword was already trembling violently, and it could come out at any time. However, he didn't dare to make a move now because the man in blood-red clothes' right hand was clasping the back of the little girl's neck. Moreover, the man in blood-red clothes wasn't weak, and he was at least at the peak of the Divine Union realm. Moreover, from his aura, he wasn't an ordinary peak of the Divine Union realm. If he made a move, he was confident that he could kill the man in blood-red clothes, but he wasn't confident that he could save the little girl before he killed the man in blood-red clothes. The man in blood-red clothes sized up Yi Xian and sneered. "Your aura isn't weak, so I guess you're not an ordinary person. Of course, this has nothing to do with me. I just want to know why you're willing to spend 1,000,000 supreme grade spirit stones to save a worthless lowly ant." Yi Xian said solemnly, "You take the supreme grade spirit stones and I take the girl. Isn't that good?" The man in blood-red clothes grinned. "I just want to know the reason, can't I?" Yi Xian pondered for a moment and said softly, "There's no reason, I'm just compassionate. That's all." "Compassionate?" The man in blood-red clothes grinned. Sure. However, 1,000,000 supreme grade spirit stones is too little. I want 5,000,000 supreme grade spirit stones. 5,000,000 supreme grade spirit stones." Jiang Jiu, who was beside Yi Xian, stared at the man in blood-red clothes, and the murderous intent in his eyes was almost tangible. Yi Xian remained silent and he didn't say a word. At this moment, the man in blood-red clothes grinned. "Not giving?" As soon as he said that, he exerted some force in his right hand. In an instant, the little girl's eyes widened and her face turned pale. She opened her mouth and a hoarse sound came from her mouth, and she was in extreme pain. Seeing this, Jiang Jiu was so angry that his entire body was trembling. Yi Xian suddenly flicked his finger, and a golden card flew to the man in blood-red clothes. The man caught the card and there were exactly 5,000,000 supreme grade spirit stones in it. The man in blood-red clothes kept the card, and then he exerted some force with his right hand. Gotcha. The little girl's neck was instantly broken. The man in blood-red clothes threw the little girl's corpse in front of Yi Xian, and looked at Yi Xian. He grinned. "I didn't say that I would give her to you alive or dead. What do you think?" Yi Xian's hands were trembling violently, and after a moment of silence he said softly, "Why?" The man in blood-red clothes was about to speak, and at this moment, a pure white sword intent suddenly swept out from Yi Xian's body. Good thought, sword intent. Yi Xian walked towards the man in blood-red clothes, and he clenched his fists, and his expression was unprecedentedly ferocious. So, a person can be so evil. Good people should be treated with kindness, and evil people should be tortured to death. Let them suffer the cruelest punishment in the world. As soon as he said that, boom. The pure white sword intent around Yi Xian instantly turned pitch black. Evil thought. Good and evil sword intent. At the same time, above the prison pagoda, the sword in the middle suddenly trembled. P.S. Please vote for me on account of my handsomeness. Otherwise, what use do I have for my peerless looks? End of this chapter. Chapter 218. How evil could human nature be? Before this, Yi Xian had seen numerous evil people. Some evil people weren't really evil. Most of the time they just had different standpoints. For example, fights frequently broke out between clans because of their interests and survival. He understood such things. At this moment he had a new understanding of evil. Many people in this world weren't fit to be called people. When they did evil they could be said to be inhumane. Just like this person before him. Human nature was extremely kind, but it was actually extremely evil as well. When he saw the seemingly material sword intent that emanated from Yi Xian, the man's expression changed drastically, and there was a trace of terror in his eyes. Material sword intent, you. At this moment, a strand of dark sword light suddenly pierced through the man's left shoulder, and his voice stopped abruptly. At the same time, the powerful force within the strand of dark sword light shook the man to the ground and pushed him back repeatedly. In the end it nailed him to a wall. The man was just about to struggle free from the strand of sword light, but another 3 strands of black sword light shot over and nailed his feet and right shoulder respectively. The man couldn't move anymore. The man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. At this moment, his eyes were filled with terror because the 4 strands of sword light were corroding him. Moreover, he hadn't been able to fight back since the beginning. Yi Xian didn't attack again. He walked over to the little girl's corpse. At this moment, the little girl's eyes were still wide open, and they were still filled with terror. She was only a child. Yi Xian brushed his right hand past the little girl's eyes. Meanwhile, the man suddenly said, "Your Excellency, I'm the grandson of the Blood Sect's vice-sect master. Your Excellency, don't bring trouble to yourself and your loved ones." Yi Xian suddenly charged over to the man, and a sword appeared in his hand. It was the Spirit Elegant sword, but at this moment, it was actually dark black. Dark black. Obviously, the Spirit Elegant sword had been affected by the sword intent of evil thoughts. However, Yi Xian didn't realize that the aura of the Spirit Elegant sword was several times stronger than before. It could be said to be close to a heaven-grade sword. Yi Xian grabbed the man's throat with a ferocious expression. "Come, have a taste of being abused." As soon as he finished speaking, he waved the exquisite sword in his hand. In an instant, the flesh on the man's body began to fly off piece by piece. Death by 1,000 cuts. At first, the man in the blood-red garments was able to endure it for a while. However, gradually he couldn't endure it any longer and began to madly shout, "You lowly ant from the Qing province. How dare you treat me like this? My blood sect will definitely wipe out your entire sect. I will exterminate your entire family." Yi Xian ignored him and swung his sword even faster. At this moment, the aura that Yi Xian exuded was extremely evil, extremely evil. Punish evil with evil. The man in blood-red clothes roared and howled hysterically. His hands had already been shaved by Yi Xian until only the bones were left, and now Yi Xian was going for his feet. Tragic. Extremely tragic, simply too tragic to look at. However, the rage in Yi Xian's heart was still difficult to quell. A sliver of deep worry appeared in Jiang Jiu's eyes as she looked at the current Yi Xian. This was because the current Yi Xian was completely different from before. The sword intent and aura that exuded from his body made her feel extremely uncomfortable. The current Yi Xian made her feel slightly afraid. Stop. Right at this moment, a furious roar suddenly sounded out from the end of the street. Before the voice could finish, an extremely powerful aura suddenly enveloped Yi Xian. Before Yi Xian could make a move, the evil sword intent around his body suddenly vibrated. Bang. The aura was instantly dispersed. Meanwhile, Yi Xian and Jiang Jiu, this chapter is not over, please continue to the next page. A black-clothed old man stood not far away. The old man's right hand held a piece of pitch-black cloth. The old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian, his eyes incomparably gloomy. "Who are you? Why did you attack a disciple of my blood sect?" Jiang Jiao suddenly stood out from beside Yi Xian and said angrily, "This is the territory of my Jiang country, yet your blood sect dares to wantonly slaughter here. Moreover, they're all defenseless old, young women and children." The old man glanced coldly at Jiang Jiao and interrupted her. "They're just ants. Their deaths aren't worth pitying." Jiang Jiao's face turned ashen when she heard this. She was just about to speak when Yi Xian suddenly said, "Why are you wasting your breath on him?" As his voice rang out, the spirit-gray sword in his right hand lightly slashed out fiercely. The blood-red clothed man was directly sliced into two by Yi Xian's sword. The old man's face instantly turned savage when he saw this. "How dare you? You!" The old man's voice stopped abruptly because Yi Xian was charging towards him with a sword in hand. Yi Xian's speed was extremely swift, and the sword aura contained within the spirit-gray sword was like a tsunami that pressed down on him to the point it was difficult for him to breathe. The old man's expression changed drastically when he sensed Yi Xian's sword aura. Is this the aura of a divine combination realm cultivator? The old man didn't have the time to think. He pulled with both hands and the black cloth in his hand suddenly unfurled. Countless streams of black air shot towards Yi Xian like numerous venomous snakes. Yi Xian was just about to attack when the spirit-gray sword in his hand shook violently. In an instant, the black air was actually completely absorbed by the spirit-gray sword. No, to be more precise, it was absorbed by his evil sword intent. When the evil sword intent absorbed the black air, the aura contained within the spirit-gray sword became even more terrifying. Yi Xian didn't think too much about it. He leaped up and slashed down with his sword. A sword of utmost evil. The old man's expression changed drastically. He hurriedly formed a hand seal with both hands, and in an instant, a gigantic black energy square shield appeared in front of him. However, the moment this black square shield appeared, it was instantly absorbed by the spirit-gray sword in Yi Xian's hand. "It's over." This was the last thought in the old man's mind. The sword fell. Boom. The old man was instantly sent flying hundreds of feet away. In the end, he crashed heavily into a house and the entire house collapsed. In the ruins, the old man slowly climbed up. However, the moment he did, Yi Xian suddenly appeared in front of him. Fresh blood gushed out of the old man's mouth continuously. He stared at Yi Xian, and as though he wanted to say something, Yi Xian suddenly slashed down with his sword. The old man's entire body was instantly split into two. Blood spurted out like a fountain. And when this blood was enveloped by Yi Xian's sword intent, it actually turned dark black. At this moment, a group of cavalry suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian. They were the Grey Billow Dao soldiers. All the cavalry dismounted and knelt on one knee and said in unison, "Greetings, Dean." Yi Xian turned to face the Grey Billow Dao soldiers. "Immediately head to various parts of the city. Kill anyone you see from the blood sect on the spot." "Yes." All the Grey Billow Dao soldiers bowed in unison, then flipped onto their horses, turned around and sprinted towards various parts of the city. Blood sect. Yi Xian's left hand was still tightly clenched, and the spirit-gray sword in his right hand was constantly trembling. Jiang Jiao suddenly walked to Yi Xian's side. She glanced at Yi Xian and said softly, "Are you all right?" Yi Xian shook his head slightly. He carried his sword and walked to a nearby noodle shop. He had a deep impression of this place. When he and his sister Yi Ling first came to Two Realm City, they had noodles here. And at this moment, there was a fat man lying on the floor of the noodle shop. It was the owner of the noodle shop. Dead. Although the population of Two Realm City wasn't high, there were still hundreds of thousands of people. And these hundreds of thousands of people? If this chapter isn't finished, please continue to the next page. At least 90% of them had been massacred. Ordinary people really didn't have any power to resist against those at the Divine Combination Realm and Myriad Dharma Realm. They could only be slaughtered. Yi Xian sat on the bench and he gently placed the spirit-gray sword on the table. He remained silent. Jiang Jiao quietly stood beside him and she also didn't speak. After an unknown period of time, a middle-aged man suddenly appeared not far away from Yi Xian and Jiang Jiao. Behind the middle-aged man, there were over 30 people, and all of them were at the peak of the Divine Combination Realm. Apart from that, there was a small Shui character on the left side of their chests. Among this group of people, the middle-aged man leading them was the Ghost Sect's Grand Elder, Shueli. Shueli walked in front of Yi Xian and Jiang Jiao. He glanced at Yi Xian and said, "I've heard of you. I heard that you are the most monstrous genius among the younger generation of Green Prefecture besides Enlancio. Yi Xian didn't say anything. Shueli glanced at the nearby old man who had been dismembered by Yi Xian's sword. When he saw this corpse, his eyes slightly narrowed. After pondering for a moment, he looked at Yi Xian and said, "My blood sect doesn't want to provoke you. However, this doesn't mean that we're afraid of you. As long as you turn a blind eye to what we've done, my blood sect will definitely not become enemies with you, Yi Xian. What do you think?" Jiang Jiu sneered, "Turn a blind eye? Watch you continue to slaughter the people of my Jiang country?" The middle-aged man said indifferently, "They're all lowly people. Why should I care?" "Lowly?" Jiang Jiu's expression was rather sinister. "Could it be that you were born as a myriad Dharma realm expert?" The middle-aged man was expressionless. "It seems that you, Yi Xian, are determined to become enemies with my blood sect. Since that's the case." At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly picked up the spirit gray sword on the table, turned around, and took a step forward before slashing down with his sword. When he saw Yi Xian suddenly attack, Shueli frowned and a cold light flashed in his eyes. He didn't dodge but instead blasted his fist forward. A bloody glow flickered on his fist. The sword and fist collided. Bang! An explosion suddenly resounded. Along with this explosion, Yi Xian and Shueli were pushed back by almost 30 meters. After Shueli stopped, he lowered his head and glanced at his fist. At this moment, his fist had already split open. Especially the back of his fist, there were quite a few cracks. Shueli was slightly shocked in his heart. After all, he was at the peak of the myriad Dharma realm. However, Yi Xian before him was only at the divine combination realm. Shueli raised his head and looked at Yi Xian, who was nearby, with a solemn expression in his eyes. Ha! Right at this moment, roaring laughter suddenly resounded from the horizon. A cloud ship slowly descended from the sky, and an old man flew out from it and arrived in the sky above Shueli and Yi Xian. Old Man Concord. Old Man Concord looked at Shueli and smiled. "Grand Elder Shueli, you still haven't replied to the old man about joining forces with you. So what's your decision?" Shueli glanced at the nearby Yi Xian, and then he said, "Since you don't know how to appreciate kindness, then die." As he spoke, he looked at Old Man Concord and said, "Let's join forces and get rid of this person first. We'll discuss the rest later, all right?" Old Man Concord roared with laughter, "All right." As he spoke, over 20 people suddenly appeared behind him, and all of them were at the divine combination realm. Moreover, there were 3 at the divine combination realm. Coupled with the blood sect below, such a lineup was extremely terrifying. Meanwhile, Old Man Concord suddenly smiled and said, "Yi Xian, aren't you a very monstrous genius? Let me tell you, the old man, there are many more monstrous geniuses than you in this world. Come and see who the old man has invited for you." As soon as Old Man Concord finished speaking, a young girl in an ice dress walked down slowly from the nearby cloud ship. End of this chapter. Chapter 219. As soon as the little girl left the boat, the temperature in the surroundings instantly plummeted, and every single time her feet touched the ground would instantly freeze. Every step she took was covered in ice. Not far away, Yi Xian was struck dumb as soon as the little girl got off the ship. On the other hand, the little girl's gaze descended onto Yi Xian at the first possible moment, and then 2 streams of icy tears slowly flowed down from her eyes when she saw Yi Xian. At this moment, Old Man Concord, who was originally smiling, was stunned. Something's off. Old Man Concord gazed at a beautiful woman behind the little girl, and the latter's beautiful brows were knit together slightly and slightly puzzled. The beautiful woman hesitated for a moment, and then she walked over to the little girl's side and spoke softly, "Your Highness." The little girl did not reply. Instead, she walked towards the nearby Yi Xian. She walked a little too quickly. At this time, Old Man Concord suddenly walked in front of the little girl and said with a smile, "Your Highness Saintess, the person my Concord sect wants to eliminate is Yi Xian." As he spoke, he pointed at Yi Xian, who stood nearby. "Eliminate Yi Xian?" The little girl was stunned. In the next moment, her eyes suddenly froze while a strand of cold energy swept out from within her. Bang! Old Man Concord was instantly blasted 300 m away without the slightest sign. Old Man Concord had just stopped when his hands were directly frozen. Not only that, but the cold energy was also spreading along his palms towards his body. If this cold energy were to enter his body, he would immediately be frozen into an ice sculpture. Without the slightest hesitation, Old Man Concord's arms shook, and then his palms fell to the ground. There wasn't a single drop of blood because they'd been frozen. he decisively abandoned his palms. Old Man Concord instantly heaved a sigh of relief when he saw the cold energy vanish along with his palms, and then he seemed to have thought of something and suddenly raised his head to look at the little girl. Why? What? At this moment, everyone here was looking at the little girl. Even the two Dharma realm experts behind the little girl were looking at her with bewilderment in their eyes. The little girl didn't answer Old Man Concord, and she just ran over to stand in front of Yi Xian. The expressions of the two Dharma realm experts behind the little girl changed drastically when they witnessed this scene, and they were just about to attack when the little girl suddenly threw herself into Yi Xian's arms. Big brother? Brother. Old Man Huan was petrified. The two 10,000 Laws realm experts behind the little girl were also stunned. Brother. The little girl before him was naturally Yi Ling. As soon as Yi Xian was hugged by Yi Ling, a chill instantly swept through his body, causing him to shiver uncontrollably. So cold. A bone-piercing cold. This was Yi Xian's first impression. Sensing Yi Xian's condition, Yi Ling hurriedly let go of Yi Xian and took a few steps back. Seeing that frost had already appeared on Yi Xian's body, she immediately panicked. Brother Yui? I didn't do it on purpose, Meanwhile, a strand of sword intent suddenly swept out from within Yi Xian. Kindness sword will. When the goodwill sword essence appeared, the cold air around him lessened a lot. Not far away, Old Man Huan suddenly looked at the two beautiful women behind Yi Ling, his expression extremely gloomy. You two, what is going on? The two beautiful women looked at each other and finally, one of them walked to Yi Ling's side and said softly, Your Highness Saintess, this time we were entrusted by the Huan sect. Hearing the beautiful woman's words, Yi Ling suddenly looked at Old Man Huan not far away, her expression extremely cold. You want to kill my brother? Although her voice was calm, it was somewhat chilling. Old Man Huan said in a deep voice, Your Highness Saintess, the Saintess you came to the Northern Chill sect, how could you be Yi Xian's sister? Could it be that you? I am his sister. Yi Ling suddenly walked towards Old Man Huan, she stared coldly at him. If anyone dares to touch a hair on my brother's head, I will destroy his entire family. With that, she suddenly flew into the air, and in an instant, pure white snowflakes suddenly floated down from the sky. In the air, Yi Ling's hands came together and the snowflakes suddenly stopped, but in the next moment the snowflakes began to spin at high speed, and in an instant the ground within a radius of 300 meters cracked, and at the same time the snowflakes shot down from the sky. Their target was Old Man Huan. Heaven-tier martial skill. Seeing this, Old Man Huan's expression changed greatly. At the moment, he did not even have the chance to escape, because the snowflakes had surrounded him from all directions. He could only fight to the death. Old Man Huan suddenly slammed his hands towards the ground. Boom. The place where he was instantly collapsed, and in the next instant, a pink blade suddenly shot up from the ground, slashing towards the sky. Wherever the pink blade passed, some of the snowflakes were directly shattered, and it directly slashed towards Yi Ling with irresistible force. Not far away, Yi Xian was about to act, but in the air, Yi Ling suddenly pointed at Old Man Huan. In the air, countless snowflakes suddenly gathered into a snow lotus, and this snow lotus directly smashed into the sharp blade. Boom. An explosion came from the sky, and under everyone's gazes the pink blade instantly shattered, while the snow lotus remained intact. Moreover, it continued straight down and smashed into Old Man Huan's body. Bang. Old Man Huan explosively retreated 300 meters, and as soon as he stopped, a wave of cold air instantly enveloped his body, and then his entire body was directly frozen and only his eyes could move. A complete defeat. Not far away, Shueli and the others were horrified. This Old Man Huan was a peak myriad Dharma realm expert. And he was defeated just like that? Moreover, this Frost North sect Saintess was actually Yi Xian's younger sister? Something was not right. Shueli glanced at Yi Ling, and she already had the intention to retreat. As for the myriad Dharma realm experts of the Joyful Union sect behind Old Man Huan, they directly turned around and fled. Obviously, to them, if they did not flee now, they would not even have the chance to escape when Yi Xian and the Frost North sect Saintess attacked together. In the air, Yi Ling suddenly pointed at the fleeing experts of the Joyful Union sect. Kill them. Kill them. Behind Yi Ling, the two myriad Dharma realm experts were somewhat hesitant. After all, the relationship between the Frost North sect and the Joyful Union sect was quite good. If they killed them again, then the two sects would really become mortal enemies. Their hesitation immediately caused the myriad Dharma realm experts of the Joyful Union sect to disappear into the sky. Seeing this, Yi Ling turned around and glanced at the two, her eyes cold. My brother is still right, everything depends on oneself. Hearing this, the two's expressions changed greatly, and they hurriedly knelt on one knee. Please calm down, Your Highness Saintess, we. The two were already anxious and sweating profusely. Although they were both in the myriad Dharma realm, in the sect, Yi Ling's current status was really above everything else. To put it bluntly, she was the hope for the complete rise of the Frost North sect. How terrifying was it to be able to kill a myriad Dharma realm expert at the age of 14? Yi Ling waved her hand. I don't need you two anymore. I will advance and retreat together with my brother. After saying this, she looked at Xueli below. The latter's expression changed greatly, and he hurriedly bowed deeply. Your Highness Saintess, this is a misunderstanding. The Blood Sect has no intention of becoming enemies with the Frost North sect. Yi Ling said coldly, but you want to become enemies with my brother. If you become enemies with my brother, then you become enemies with me. As soon as she finished speaking, she suddenly took a step forward. With this step, a cold current suddenly poured down from the sky. At this moment, the temperature in the area plummeted again, and everyone felt as if they were in an ice house. At the same time, countless snowflakes suddenly appeared above Xueli and the others. Each snowflake was like a sharp blade, making people shudder. Seeing this scene, Xueli was horrified. Retreat, retreat immediately. This time he had brought most of the elite disciples of the Blood Sect. If they all died here, it would undoubtedly be a great blow to the Blood Sect's vitality. At this moment, with Yi Xian and the others here, together with Yi Ling and the Frost North sect, it could be said that the Blood Sect had no chance at all. We must flee. After receiving Xueli's order, the experts of the Blood Sect behind him instantly retreated while Yi Ling's snowflakes had already shot down from the sky. Ah! In an instant, heart-wrenching screams instantly resounded in the area. The Blood Sect's Divine Unity stage experts were actually unable to resist the snowflakes at all. Even Yi Xian was a little shocked at this moment. Because Yi Ling was so powerful that even he was a little unfamiliar with her. Xueli's expression instantly turned ferocious when he saw the miserable deaths of his own sect's disciples. He suddenly raised his head to look at Yi Ling in the sky. In the next moment, he transformed into a bloody shadow that shot explosively towards Yi Ling. Obviously, he couldn't care less at this moment. At the moment Xueli attacked, Yi Xian suddenly leaped up and slashed his sword down towards Xueli. At this moment, the spirit elegant sword in his hand was still dark black, and this slash directly caused space to tremble slightly. One sword to decide life and death. After adding the evil will sword intent, the power of his sword had exceeded any of his previous attacks. Xueli, who was originally charging towards Yi Ling, suddenly stopped. When he saw the power of Yi Xian's sword, his pupils instantly shrank to the size of a needle, and his eyes were filled with disbelief. A Divine Unity stage expert was actually able to display such a terrifying sword attack? Xueli didn't dare to think too much about it. The profound qi in his body surged and he suddenly turned around and slapped out with his palm. In the center of his palm, a blood-red energy palm print vibrated out. At this moment Yi Xian's sword arrived. Boom! The blood-red energy palm print instantly shattered, and Xueli was instantly blasted hundreds of meters away. As soon as he landed on the ground beneath his feet instantly cracked. At the same time, blood flowed continuously from the corner of his mouth, and his entire right arm had been chopped off by Yi Xian's sword. Although he didn't die, he was seriously injured and had completely lost the ability to fight. At this moment, a group of cavalry suddenly charged in from all directions. Blue Wave's Dao soldiers. After hundreds of cavalry joined the battlefield, the Blood Sect disciples immediately either fled or died. Yi Xian suddenly said, "Don't let a single one of them go. After killing all the Blood Sect disciples, hang their heads on the city gates of Two Realm City to console the souls of the hundreds of thousands of people in Two Realm City." Not far away, Xueli glared at Yi Xian with an incomparably ferocious expression. "My Blood Sect will not let." Before he finished speaking, Yi Xian suddenly rushed in front of him and slashed horizontally with his sword. Xueli's head directly flew off. Yi Xian sheathed the spirit elegant sword, turned around and walked in front of Yi Ling. Then he took her little hand and said, "Let's go. Brother will take you to eat noodles." Chapter 220. Eat noodles. Yi Xian pulled Yi Ling towards the noodle stall in the distance. Yi Ling's body was still cold, but it was blocked by Yi Xian's goodwill sword essence. Therefore, when Yi Xian held her hand, he was not too affected. At the noodle stall, Yi Xian placed a stool behind Yi Ling. Seeing that there was blood on the stool, He used his sleeve to wipe it 3 times before letting Yi Ling sit down. As for himself, he hurriedly ran to the stove and started a fire. Cook it himself. Fortunately, there were still various ingredients. Otherwise, they might not be able to eat the noodles. As for Yi Ling, she sat quietly on the stool that had already been frozen. She looked at Yi Xian, who was busy not far away, with a faint smile on her face. Her heart was incomparably satisfied and blissful. At this moment, she did not look like the northern chill saintess at all. She was just an ordinary little girl. On the other side, Jiang Jiu glanced at Yi Xian and Yi Ling with a trace of envy in his eyes. Yi Xian's kindness towards Yi Ling was not the slightest bit fake, nor was there any benefit involved. It was pure kindness. This kind of kindness was the most genuine and purest. As someone who was born in the royal family, she had never received such kindness. In the royal family, there was only mutual deceit and mutual destruction. After a while, Yi Xian brought a bowl of noodles to Yi Ling. However, the bowl of noodles was instantly frozen. It was frozen solid, the expressions of the siblings froze. But soon the siblings laughed again. Yi Ling got up and gently hugged Yi Xian. She said softly, "Brother, I missed you." Yi Xian's body stiffened. After a while, he gently hugged Yi Ling, "Brother too." The brother and sister hugged each other tightly. On the other side, the Grey Waves Dao soldiers had already killed all the disciples of the Blood Sect. All the heads of the disciples of the Blood Sect were hung on the city gates of Two Realm City. What happened in Two World City was undoubtedly a great shock to the experts from the Divine Central Continent. 10,000 Dharma Realm cultivator and more than 30 Divine Combination Realm cultivators were all killed. At this moment, all the experts from the Central Divine Prefecture recognized a person, and it was Yi Xian. After what happened in Two World City, some of the experts from the Divine Central Continent who had wanted to come to the Kingdom of Jiang had given up on the idea. In the city, an old woman in a hemp robe suddenly brought 3 heads to Yi Ling and Yi Xian. The siblings looked at the old woman, and the old woman threw the heads on the ground. These 3 heads belonged to the 3 Dharma Realm experts who had escaped from the He Huan sect. The old woman walked in front of Yi Ling and said softly, "Xiao Linger, you said before that you must rely on yourself for everything. This point is not wrong. But I want to tell you that no matter what happens, the Frigid North sect will always be your strongest shield." Yi Ling glanced at the 3 heads and didn't say anything. Yi Xian suddenly cupped his fists at the old woman. "Senior, my younger sister is still young. Please forgive her for her inappropriate words." As he spoke, he looked at Yi Ling with a stern expression. "Linger, Brother Zhengjing once told you that we must never repay kindness with evil. The Frigid North sect not only cured your typhoid, but also gave you the ability you have today. We siblings must remember this kindness for the rest of our lives." Yi Ling nodded slightly and said softly, "I understand, brother." As she spoke, she looked at the old woman in front of her. "Granny Lung, the Frigid North sect has treated me extremely well. I won't throw a tantrum in the future." The old woman's expression softened. She smiled and said, "We're all family. There's no problem." As she spoke, she looked at Yi Xian, who was standing next to Yi Ling. After sizing up Yi Xian, she said, "You're Xiao Linger's brother, Yi Xian?" Yi Xian nodded. "Yes." The old woman nodded. "I've heard of you before, but I'm surprised to see you in person. Not only are you talented and powerful, but you're also a very good person. It's Xiao Linger's fortune to have you as her brother, and it's also the Frigid North sect's fortune." Obviously she approved of Yi Xian. The old man had seen Yi Xian fight with Xueli. He had become a sword master at such a young age. His talent was not much worse than Yi Ling's. Why would the Frigid North sect deliberately target such a monstrous genius? Most importantly, he was Yi Ling's brother. It was not an exaggeration to say that he was half a member of the Frigid North sect. For the Frigid North sect, taking Yi Ling in was undoubtedly a very profitable deal. It was like buying one and getting one free. Hearing that the old woman approved of Yi Xian, Yi Ling was overjoyed. She actually had feelings for the Frigid North sect. After she came to the Frigid North sect, the people there treated her very well. At this moment, the old woman looked at Yi Ling. "Xiao Linger, it's over. We should go back." "Go back?" Yi Ling was stunned. She shook her head and held Yi Xian's arm tightly. "I'll go with you, brother." The old woman smiled bitterly. "You haven't completely subdued the relic in your body. To do so, you must return to the Frigid North sect. We need to help you with the Frigid North formation. Otherwise, if the relic backfires, you'll be in danger." "Relic?" Yi Xian looked at the old woman in confusion. The old woman nodded. The number one relic in the frigid North sect hasn't been recognized by anyone for almost 100 years. And Xiaolinger has the highest chance. If she can get the relic's recognition, Xiaolinger's strength will go through a great transformation again. It'll be very beneficial for her. Besides, speaking of this, her expression gradually became serious. Her physique is a bit beyond our imagination. Anyway, we must let her return to the frigid North sect. But Yi Ling hugged Yi Xian tightly and would not let go. Seeing this, the old woman smiled bitterly. Although Yi Ling could easily kill a Dharma realm cultivator, she was still a child. Helpless, the old woman could only look at Yi Xian, hoping that Yi Xian could help persuade her. Yi Xian thought for a long time. In the end, she turned to Yi Ling and said with a smile, "Senior said that if you can subdue the relic in your body, your strength will become even stronger, right?" Yi Ling nodded. "Yes." Yi Xian gently rubbed Yi Ling's little head. "The stronger you are, the better you can help Big Brother." Yi Ling looked up at Yi Xian. "But I want to stay with you." Yi Xian smiled. "Once I'm done here, I'll immediately go to the Divine Central Continent to find you, okay?" Yi Ling lowered her head and did not speak. The old woman's smile became even more bitter. Yi Xian was about to speak when Yi Ling suddenly looked up at him. "One day. I'll stay with Big Brother for one day. I'll go back after one day." Her eyes were full of pleading and a little nervous, afraid that Yi Xian would not agree. How could Yi Xian not agree? He gently rubbed Yi Ling's little head and said with a smile, "Okay. One day." The old woman heaved a sigh of relief when she heard Yi Ling's words. Just like that, Yi Xian brought Yi Ling back to the imperial capital of the kingdom of Jiang. On that day he did nothing but go shopping and play with Yi Ling. At night, Yi Xian and Yi Ling sat on the top of a mountain. A bright moon hung in the sky, and the sky was filled with stars. Yi Ling snuggled up to Yi Xian and held Yi Xian's arm tightly with her little hands. "Big Brother, why are your eyes closed?" "I'm cultivating a peerless divine technique, so I can't open my eyes for now." "A peerless divine technique? Is it powerful?" "Is it as powerful as my wintry North sect's 10,000-mile freeze?" "That's a heaven-grade martial technique." "It might not be as powerful as yours. It's okay. I'll teach you the next time you come to the wintry North sect." "All right, the wintry North sect has a lot of good stuff. I heard from the sect leader that I'll be the sect leader of the wintry North sect in the future, which means that all those things are mine. Well, you can take whatever you want. I'll give them all to you." Yi Xian, in the dark, Granny Lung's expression was a little ugly. "Big Brother, I want to hear a story. Once upon a time there was a mountain and there was a temple on the mountain. In the temple." After daybreak, only Yi Xian was left on the mountain. Yi Xian sat on the mountain and looked into the distance in a daze. He only stood up when it was noon. There was a storage ring in his hand. In the storage ring, there were 3 low-grade swords, 2 middle-grade swords, and 1 superior-grade sword. There was also a heaven-grade sword. A heaven-grade sword. Yi Xian took out the heaven-grade sword. The sword was about 4 feet and 5 inches long. The blade was thin and it was emitting a lightning glow. Force. This sword had its own lightning force. On the hilt of the sword there were 2 small black words, Heavenly Thunder. Heavenly Thunder Sword. Looking at the swords in front of him, Yi Xian had mixed feelings. These were left behind by Yi Ling. He did not know how Yi Ling had collected these swords. After a long time, Yi Xian put away the swords. The Divine Central Continent. With that he turned and left. Blue Waves Academy. Yi Xian returned to Blue Waves Academy. When Mo Yunqi and Bai Zhe saw Yi Xian in front of the Blue Waves Palace, Missouri Yunqi rushed up and gave Yi Xian a big hug. Bai Zhe pursed his lips. How sentimental. Jianji glanced at Yi Xian and continued to nibble on the chicken drumstick in his hand. Feeling Mo Yunqi, Bai Zhe and Jianji in front of him, Yi Xian grinned. It's great that everyone is here. Family. In his heart, Mo Yunqi and the others were no longer just friends but family. The path of the sword was lonely. If there were no friends or brothers along the way, what was the point of reaching the peak? If there were a few friends and brothers, even if the path of the sword couldn't reach the peak, so what? Yi Xian was about to speak, when Mo Yunqi suddenly smiled mysteriously. Bandit Yi, don't speak for now. Come. With that, Mo Yunqi and the others led Yi Xian into the Blue Waves Palace. The inside of the palace was pitch black. Just as he was about to use his sword intent to sense the surroundings, the hall suddenly lit up and the entire palace was illuminated. In front of Yi Xian was a huge table. On the table were more than a dozen dishes. However, these dishes were extremely ugly, and some of them were so black that it was impossible to tell what they were. In the center of all the dishes was a large plate, and on the plate was a longevity peach the size of a watermelon. Longevity peach. Mo Yunqi walked in front of Yi Xian and grinned. Bandit Yi, happy birthday. Birthday? Yi Xian was stunned on the spot. Because ever since he and his sister could remember, they had never celebrated their birthday. P.S. If I don't have your company, even if I have millions of years, what's the point? Although sometimes you scold me for being weak. Scold me for being thick-skinned, shameless, ugly. But I still love you all. It's 3 p.m. today. It's really not easy to write 3 p.m. in the hospital. Everyone praise me. I can't guarantee that I can write 3 p.m. every day, but I will try my best. I can only try my best. Chapter 221. Birthday. Back then, in the Yi family, he and his sister could not even have enough food and clothing, let alone a birthday celebration. To him, it was already a blessing to be able to survive with his sister. Usually, when he and his sister could eat a bowl of noodles, it was the happiest time. In front of Yi Xian, Mo Yunqi patted Yi Xian's shoulder. What are you thinking about? Yi Xian collected his thoughts, smiled and said, How did you know that today is my birthday? Mo Yunqi looked at Jianji, who was not far away. Sister Ji said it. Jianji. Yi Xian turned to look at Jianji, who was expressionless, nibbling on the chicken leg and did not say anything. Come, let's eat. Mo Yunqi suddenly pulled Yi Xian to sit down. He placed a dish in front of Yi Xian and smiled. This is a plate of stir-fried potatoes that I personally made. Come and try it. Yi Xian looked down at the plate in front of him, his expression stiff. How is this a damn potato? This is clearly mud. Yi Xian thought for a moment, then said seriously, Actually, I may not be hungry. Mo Yunqi's face darkened. This is our painstaking effort, Bandit Yi, you can't not give us face. Yi Xian was a little helpless. He picked up a piece of chopsticks and put it in his mouth. After a moment his mouth began to twitch. But very quickly Yi Xian's expression returned to normal. He picked up a few pieces and ate while saying, Delicious. Really delicious. Mo Yunqi was stunned, then said with some excitement, Really? Yi Xian nodded seriously, More real than real gold. Bai Zai's face was full of disbelief. He walked to Yi Xian's side, picked up a piece. After taking a bite he blinked, then looked at Mo Yunqi. Delicious. Mo Yunqi laughed and patted Bai Zai's shoulder. I already said what can stump me, Mo Yunqi? Nothing. With that he picked up a piece for himself. The next moment he ran to the door and started vomiting. Not only Mo Yunqi, but Yi Xian and Bai Zai also started to vomit crazily. A moment later the three of them gulped down water. At this moment, Jianji walked over to Yi Xian with a braised fish. She just looked at Yi Xian. Clearly she had made this and wanted Yi Xian to try it. Yi Xian faced the plate in front of him. On the plate a fish was twitching, alive. Yi Xian's expression froze. His heart was racing. At the side Mo Yunqi kindly reminded, Big Sister Ji, this fish seems to be alive. Jianji shot a glance at Mo Yunqi, his expression somewhat unfriendly. The latter's expression changed drastically and he hurriedly said, No, I saw wrongly. This fish is dead. Although Jianji was usually taciturn in the entire Blue Waves Academy, there was no one who wasn't afraid of her. Because if she was angry she was truly terrifying. She could chase you for 3 days and 3 nights. At the side, Bai Zai's brain was clearly short-circuited. He looked at the fish on the plate. It's clearly alive. And it's still moving. At this moment, Jianji suddenly drew her blade and slashed at Bai Zai. The latter's expression changed drastically, and he blocked with his arms. Bang! The two of them retreated rapidly, and this time they retreated for over 30 meters. But the next moment, Jianji rushed forward again and slashed down with her blade. Seeing Bai Zai being chased by Jianji, Yi Xian and Mo Yunqi laughed heartily. After a quarter of an hour, the four of them sat around the table. Yi Xian took out a blade. When this blade appeared, it immediately attracted the attention of Jianji, who was opposite Yi Xian. True grade middle grade blade. The blade was about 3 feet long and the blade was rather thin. It was shaped like a willow leaf, and the blade was extremely thin. Moreover, it emitted a cold blade light. Before Yi Xian could speak, Jianji stretched out his hand. His meaning was self-evident. Yi Xian shook his head and smiled, and he passed the blade to Jianji. Jianji put the blade away, and her eyes were filled with undisguised fondness. Yi Xian faced Bai Zai and Mo Yunqi, but Mo Yunqi suddenly shook his head. The two of us don't want it. Yi Xian didn't understand and asked, Why? Mo Yunqi smiled bitterly. The two of us can't always rely on you. If we do, we'll only become more and more useless in the long run. If we want equipment, we'll fight for it ourselves. Actually, there was another reason that he didn't say, and that was that they didn't want the relationship between them and Yi Xian to change. It was normal for brothers to help each other, but if it was always Yi Xian who helped them, the relationship between them might change over time. Even if there was only a small possibility, they didn't want it to become a reality. Yi Xian was silent for a long time, and in the end he nodded slightly. Fine. I respect your choice. Mo Yunqi grinned. Come eat. Everyone's expression instantly froze. A moment later Yi Xian left the hall. Inside the hall, Bai Zhe glanced at Yi Xian who was leaving and said softly, Did you feel it? Bandit Yi is getting stronger and stronger. Bai Zhe was silent. Jiangji was still gnawing on the drumstick. Mo Yunqi shook his head and smiled. He can already kill 10,000 Dharma realm, and none of the three of us can do it. Then work hard. Bai Zhe suddenly stood up and slapped the table, and the entire table instantly shattered. Mo Yunqi looked at Bai Zhe in shock. Bai Zhe clenched his fists. I'm now at the peak of Divine Unity realm, and the demonic beast bloodline in my body is getting stronger and stronger. Give me another half a year and I can kill a 10,000 Dharma realm with one punch. Half a year? Mo Yunqi looked at Bai Zhe with disdain. I'll give you 10 years. Half a year. After waiting for you for half a year, Bandit Yi can already kill law-controlling realm. Bai Zhe, Mo Yunqi stood up. I'm going to cultivate. With that he turned and left. Back Mountain of Blue Waves Academy. Jiang Jiu brought 10 people to the back of Yi Xian. She walked to Yi Xian's side. The people you want, King Tuoba and I have chosen them. Yi Xian turned around and in front of him stood 10 people. 5 of them were picked from Blue Waves Academy, and the other 5 were picked from Ning Country's Golden Guards by Tuoba Yen, and they were all top elites. All 10 of them were at the peak of Divine Unity realm, and their combat strength was top-notch. Seeing Yi Xian, 5 Blue Waves Academy soldiers hurriedly bowed to Yi Xian. Greetings, Dean. As for the 5 Golden Guards, they only bowed slightly to Yi Xian, but their expressions were filled with respect. Yi Xian walked to the front of the 10 people, and in an instant, a powerful sword aura was suddenly emitted from the Lingxiu sword in his hand. This aura instantly forced the 10 people in front of him to retreat, but very quickly, the 5 Blue Waves Academy soldiers stabbed their spears into the ground. With their spears plunged into the ground, the 5 of them forcefully blocked Yi Xian's attack. However, the 5 Golden Guards were still forced to retreat rapidly. They only came to a stop after retreating a few dozen feet. There was still a certain gap between the 5 Golden Guards and the Blue Waves Academy soldiers. At this moment, the 5 Golden Guards' expressions were rather ugly. Being defeated by the Blue Waves Academy soldiers like this, it was clearly very embarrassing. Yi Xian withdrew his sword aura, and walked to the front of the 5 Golden Guards. I'll give you a chance. If you don't pass, then go back to where you came from. With that, he turned to Jiang Jiu. Let Miss Lu train the 10 of them alone. Jiang Jiu nodded. Leave this matter to me. Yi Xian flicked his finger, and a storage ring flew to Jiang Jiu. Inside this storage ring, there is a supreme-grade spirit vein. This spirit vein should be placed in Blue Waves Academy. Hearing this, Jiang Jiu was delighted. It should be known that if this supreme-grade spirit vein was placed in Blue Waves Academy, it would not only benefit Blue Waves Academy, but also the entire imperial capital of Jiang Country. It could be said that with this supreme-grade spirit vein, Jiang Country would not be too chaotic for the time being. Because with sufficient spiritual qi, the morale of the people would be stable. Soon Jiang Jiu led the 10 people away. Yi Xian raised his head to look at the sky. Right now, he was already somewhat impatient to go to the central divine continent. At this moment, a figure suddenly landed behind Yi Xian, and Yi Xian turned around in surprise. It was none other than Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli walked over to Yi Xian's side, lightly combed her beautiful hair behind her ear and said softly, You repelled the Blood Sect and the Joyful Union Sect. Now, many people from the central divine continent don't dare to come to the state of Jiang. As for my great cloud realm, I've killed over 300 experts from the central divine continent, including 6 in the myriad Dharma realm. As she spoke, she turned to look at Yi Xian. The situation in Azure Prefecture has stabilized for the time being. Now there are only 2 problems left. First, the origin of Azure Prefecture's local spirit vein. Azure Prefecture's origin has been greatly damaged, and if we want to repair it, we must use spirit veins, not supreme-grade spirit veins but better ones. And Azure Prefecture doesn't have such spirit veins. Go to the central divine continent? Yi Xian asked. Lian Wanli nodded. We must go to the central divine continent. Of course, the urgent matter at hand is not to go to the central divine continent, but to resist the experts from the central divine continent and Blue Waves Prefecture. I've already received intelligence that Blue Waves Prefecture has become a wasteland. Those people who were in Blue Waves Prefecture have already rushed to our Azure Prefecture. In addition, the conflicts between the various forces of the Blue Firmament world are intensifying. I fear that the Realm Defense Alliance will find it difficult to suppress them. What? Yi Xian was puzzled. Even the Realm Defense Alliance will find it difficult to suppress them. Lian Wanli nodded slightly. As far as I know, the Realm Defense Alliance seems to have encountered trouble. It seems that a monster beast is specifically looking for trouble with them. At this point she looked at Yi Xian. Do you know what that monster beast is called? Yi Xian shook his head. How would I know? Yi Xian. Lian Wanli stared straight at Yi Xian. That monster beast says that its name is Yi Xian. Yi Xian was stunned. Yi Xian? Yi Xian? What the hell? Lian Wanli just stared at Yi Xian. No one knew what she was thinking. Yi Xian was about to speak, but at this moment he seemed to have thought of something and his expression changed. Yi Xian. Monster beast. It can't be that god from the second floor, right? Cold sweat dripped down from Yi Xian's forehead. The more he thought about it, the more he felt that it was possible. Because it couldn't be such a coincidence. However, he couldn't understand why this god from the second floor would fight with the Realm Defense Alliance. It was fine if they were fighting, but why did he tell others that it was called Yi Xian? Wasn't this inviting trouble for him? At this moment, an armored woman suddenly appeared beside Lian Wanli. The armored woman knelt on one knee. Your Majesty, we have received intelligence that in at most 2 days, the experts from Blue Waves Prefecture will arrive at Myriad Mound Mountain. Lian Wanli suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian. This time, Green Prefecture has suffered heavy losses. We can't let these people enter Green Prefecture, otherwise who knows how many people will die in Green Prefecture. As she spoke, she pointed to the sky. Bring your people and follow me to Myriad Mound Mountain. We will save the world, save Blue Firmament world, save billions of lives. Yi Xian was silent and didn't say anything. Lian Wanli retracted her jade-like hand and said indifferently, they came from Blue Waves Prefecture and all of them are filthy rich? Yi Xian suddenly asked. You just said to save the world? Save Green Prefecture? Save billions of lives? Lian Wanli nodded. Yi Xian said seriously, save the world, save Green Prefecture, save billions of lives. I Yi Xian am duty-bound. Lian Wanli asked, not for wealth? Yi Xian said angrily, am I that kind of person? Chapter 222. On the mountain, Lian Wanli gazed at Yi Xian silently. You're exactly that kind of person. Her tone was firm and she didn't give him any face at all. Yi Xian's face darkened. Miss Lian, looks like you don't know me well enough. But it doesn't matter. I'm not interested in you anyway. At this moment, Lian Wanli, who was right in front of him, suddenly rushed forward and slapped his palm towards him. It was as fast as lightning. Yi Xian's expression changed slightly. He took a step forward and slammed his fist against Lian Wanli's palm. However, his expression changed drastically because this punch felt like it had hit a piece of cotton. It was soft. Yi Xian was just about to withdraw his fist when Lian Wanli suddenly grabbed his wrist. In the next moment, Lian Wanli pulled his wrist towards herself. At the same time, she struck her knee against Yi Xian's abdomen. Bang! Yi Xian instantly retreated over 300 meters. Yi Xian said angrily, are you crazy? Lian Wanli glanced at Yi Xian and said indifferently, my hands are itchy. I want to hit someone. Hearing this, Yi Xian was enraged. His figure trembled and he shot towards Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli was expressionless. She tapped the ground lightly with the tip of her foot, and her figure floated forward. Her figure was slightly blurry and strange. Because her figure was slightly distorted, and it wasn't just her, even the space around her was slightly distorted. Yi Xian arrived and punched. This punch was enhanced with battle intent. However, in the next moment, bang! Yi Xian retreated rapidly and this time he retreated over 300 meters. After Yi Xian stopped, he didn't attack again and his expression was rather solemn. Lian Wanli placed her right hand behind her back and said indifferently, attack! Yi Xian didn't hesitate at all. He pressed his fingers together and pointed forward. A ray of sword light flashed and slashed towards Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli didn't dodge at all. When the sword light was half a zhang away from her, it suddenly stopped and started to distort. No, it wasn't the sword light that was distorting, it was the space and the sword light was being restricted by space. Just like that, the wisp of sword light became more and more distorted and finally disappeared. Yi Xian was silent. Lian Wanli walked in front of Yi Xian. The 10,000 Dharma realm is divided into the pseudo 10,000 Dharma realm and the true 10,000 Dharma realm. The so-called pseudo 10,000 Dharma realm is just reaching the 10,000 Dharma realm, but without truly comprehending the mysteries of the 10,000 Dharma realm. The secret of the 10,000 laws realm was the use of space. Only those who have reached the 10,000 Dharma realm can truly grasp the mysteries of space and use them. As she spoke, she looked directly at Yi Xian. There are very few Dharma realm experts in the Azure province who can do this, but there are many in the central divine prefecture. It's very likely that we'll encounter such a powerhouse on this trip to Wuxia Mountain. If you still look down on the Dharma realm, you'll definitely suffer a great loss. Yi Xian was silent for a long time. Finally he nodded. I understand. The Lian Wanli before him was undoubtedly the true 10,000 Dharma realm. Although he hadn't fought to the death with Lian Wanli just now, he could already feel the terror of the true 10,000 Dharma realm from their two exchanges. The path of the sword Daoi could never be taken lightly. At this time, Lian Wanli added, the trip to Wuxia Mountain will take a day and a half. Make some arrangements then set off immediately. With that, she and the armored woman turned and left. When Yi Xian returned to Blue Wave Hall, he called Ji Anji Mo Yunqi and the others over. All the core members of Blue Wave Academy were present in the hall. 2 hours later Yi Xian left Blue Wave Hall. He only brought 3 people with him, Ji Anji Mo Yunqi and Bai Zhe. He didn't bring the Blue Wave Dao soldiers because there were still many mercenaries and sects in the central divine prefecture. These Blue Wave Dao soldiers had to remain in Azure province to intimidate these mercenaries and sections. On the cloud ship, Yi Xian stood at the bow of the ship. He leaned against the pole with both hands deep in thought. Save Azure province. He never thought he would one day accomplish such a magnificent feat, because he never thought of himself as a hero. In fact, he didn't even think of himself as a good person. But now he actually wanted to save Azure province. Even he found it hard to believe. When did he become so great? However, he really had no choice but to go. The state of Jiang was his country, his home. Here there were his friends, his brothers and the students of his academy. The incident in Two Realm City made him realize how evil a person could be. There was no limit to the evil of human nature. And now these experts from Blue Wave Prefecture were no longer humans. They were all wolves, bloodthirsty wolves. If these people were allowed to step into Azure Province, the country of Jiang, and the country of Ning, one could imagine how terrifying it would be. In the world of martial artists, the strong rarely showed mercy to the weak. Most of the time, it was the strong who bullied and plundered the weak. Yi Xian didn't want to be a savior, nor had he ever wanted to be one. He only wanted everyone around him to be safe and sound. In other words, not even the heavenly emperor could touch my people. At this moment, a fragrant wind blew over, and a woman appeared next to Yi Xian. Lian Wanli. Lian Wanli looked down at the cloud ship and said softly, "Look at these great rivers and mountains. How beautiful. But under such beautiful scenery are countless corpses and blood." As she spoke up to this point, she suddenly looked at Yi Xian. Before this, I always felt that Qingzhou had become like this because of that sword strike from your master. But later I felt that I was wrong. Azure Province became like this because of human nature. Good people can become evil and bad people can become even more evil. Good and evil. Yi Xian was a little dazed. His sword Dao was the good and evil sword Dao, but what was good? What was evil? Yi Xian stood at the bow of the ship, as if he was meditating. Lian Wanli glanced at Yi Xian, then turned and left. She knew that Yi Xian might have comprehended something. The cloud ship continued forward, getting closer and closer to Myriad Mountain. Blood sect of the divine central continent. 30 or so people stood in a gloomy hall, and the smell of blood was extremely strong. A black-robed middle-aged man sat at the head of the hall. He was the sect master of the blood sect, Shuiyu. Below him, an old man had a ferocious expression as he recounted what had happened in Azure Province. My blood sect's grand elder was killed, and more than 30 elite disciples were slaughtered. Their heads were hung on the city walls of Two World City by Yi Xian, and their corpses were hunted by wild dogs and vultures. At this point he looked at Shuiyu. The young sect master was also beheaded by Yi Xian in Two World City. The hall fell silent. Shuiyu was expressionless and no one knew what he was thinking. After a moment of silence, an old man suddenly said angrily, "This Yi Xian has gone too far. He doesn't respect our blood sect at all." As he spoke, he looked at Shuiyu. "Sect master, we must take revenge. Most of the people present nodded in agreement. Shuiyu glanced at the old man who spoke. Do you know anything about Yi Xian? The old man was slightly taken aback. He shook his head. How could I know about the barbarians of Azure Province? Shuiyu suddenly interrupted the old man. Barbarians? The barbarians you speak of can already kill 10,000 Dharma Realm cultivators at the Divine Unity Realm. Furthermore, he's a sword master who's not even 20 years old. The old man's face was filled with shock. This? Shuiyu slowly closed his eyes. We must take revenge. However, we can't fight him head-on like this. We have to borrow his strength. I'll personally go to the Devil Sect. Before that, no one is allowed to step into Azure Province to look for Yi Xian. After saying that, he disappeared. The Joyful Union Sect. At this moment, the Joyful Union Sect was just like the Blood Sect. The entire sect was furious after learning that several 10,000 Dharma Realm cultivators had been killed. At this moment, the Joyful Union Hall was extremely lively. Everyone was discussing how to punish Yi Xian and avenge Old Man Joyful and the others. The Joyful Union sect master was a middle-aged man called Li Yuan. From the beginning until now, he hadn't said a single word. He only listened quietly. In the hall, the voices gradually quieted down. Many people looked at Li Yuan. Because at this moment, they realized that no matter what they said, they needed the person in front of them to agree. Seeing that everyone had stopped, Li Yuan opened his eyes and said indifferently, 2 points. First, Yi Xian destroyed Azure Province's Karaki Academy and forced the Dark World to retreat from Azure Province. Second, he's still alive and the Frigid North sect hasn't given us any explanation. Everyone looked at each other. At this moment, they realized that things weren't that simple. Li Yuan glanced at everyone. Karaki Academy is much stronger than our Joyful Union sect. However, even they can't do anything to Yi Xian. Do you think he's that simple? An old man suddenly said, Are we just going to let this matter go? Li Yuan looked at the old man. If we continue to target him, the Joyful Union sect may be completely destroyed. The old man was silent. Li Yuan slowly closed his eyes. Pass down my order. All disciples of the Joyful Union sect are not allowed to step into Azure Province. As for revenge, I will personally investigate this person and decide whether or not to take revenge. With that, he stood up and disappeared from the hall. On the cloud ship. Standing at the bow of the ship, Yi Xian was still thinking about one question. Good and evil. His sword principle was the good and evil sword principle. Comprehending the good and evil sword intent was just the beginning. His sword Tao and sword intent still had a very long way to go. As for good and evil, he didn't have an accurate concept of what was good and what was evil. Because many times a good person could also be evil and a bad person might not be really evil. Just like that, Yi Xian stood for a day and a night. On the second day, the cloud ship had entered a mountain range. During this time, Lian Wanli and the others didn't disturb Yi Xian. About 2 hours later, the cloud ship stopped. Lian Wanli led Azhua to the cloud ship. Behind them were Mo Yunqi and the other two as well as little monster Tuoba. This girl was the last to chase after them. In front of them were 2 towering mountains that pierced the clouds. The 2 mountains were separated by about 300 meters and just happened to be a passageway. Beyond the 2 mountains was a boundless ocean. This was the only passageway from the Divine Central Continent and Azure Wave Province to Azure Province. The passageway between the 2 mountains was called Azure Province Path. Once one entered this path, they would reach Azure Province. Lian Wanli stood at the very front. Today she wore a black phoenix robe and a black phoenix coronet on her head. Her brows were slightly thick and she looked somewhat cold and solemn. At this moment, a man in black suddenly swept over from the distance. He was extremely fast, arriving in front of Lian Wanli in the blink of an eye. He knelt on one knee. My king, the experts of the Divine Central Continent from Azure Wave Province are about to enter Azure Province Path. Lian Wanli said indifferently, How many? The man in black said, Among them, there are 16 in the Myriad Dharma Realm, 321 at the peak of the Divine Unity Realm, 6 first-rate mercenary groups, and countless disciples of aristocratic families and independent cultivators. Besides that, we've also discovered 7 experts on the demon-level genius rankings. They are ranked 26th, 17th, 15th, 13th, 10th, and 4th. 4th. Little monster Tuoba suddenly looked at the man in black in astonishment. The man in black nodded. Absolutely. Little monster Tuoba blinked when she heard this, and then she looked up at the sky. The weather today isn't good. It's not suitable for battle. Lien Wanli nodded. This king thinks, that's reasonable. Retreat. With that she turned around and left. The crowd was speechless. Chapter 223. Retreat. Mo Yunchi and the others were dumbfounded. They're retreating for real. Your Majesty. At this moment the armored woman beside Lien Wanli suddenly said, if we retreat, these people will go deep into the hinterland of Qingzhou. At that time Qingzhou will be covered with corpses. Lien Wanli stopped moving. She slowly closed her eyes and didn't speak. Everyone was silent. This was a barrier. If they abandoned this barrier, it meant that those people would enter the land of Qingzhou. Given the madness of these people, the entire Qingzhou would immediately become purgatory on earth. Whether it was Great Cloud Empire, Jiang Country or Ning Country, none of them would be spared. Everyone was looking at Lien Wanli, waiting for her reply. After a while, Lien Wanli turned to look at the distant Qingzhou path. Many cloud ships could be vaguely seen on the sea surface outside the two mountains. They're here. A moment later, Lien Wanli suddenly turned to look at Yi Xian on the cloud ship not far away. At this moment Yi Xian on the cloud ship moved. Under everyone's gaze Yi Xian walked down from the cloud ship. He walked to Lien Wanli's side and faced the distant Qingzhou path. You're here? Lien Wanli nodded and asked, have you thought it through? Yi Xian nodded. Good and evil. His understanding was that regardless of whether it was good or evil, he would protect those who should be protected with his life. Those who should be killed he would kill with his life. It was that simple. Sword Dao, there was really no need to make it too complicated and mysterious. Everything should be simple. After thinking it through, Yi Xian found that there were no changes in his sword intent and sword principle. However, he didn't care. With his mind connected, his sword was unstoppable. Without the doubts in his heart, his sword would be more decisive and faster. In fact, he didn't realize that his sword intent had changed. It had become more substantial. At this moment, the cloud ships outside the two mountains had stopped. Soon, some people got off the cloud ships and went straight to Yi Xian's group. After those people got off the cloud ship, they all started cheering. They who came from Kanglan province could be said to have made a lot of money. Each of them was overflowing with wealth. Now the Azure province would be the next place they would plunder. All of them were cheering excitedly as they ran. In the crowd far away, a man ran extremely fast. As he ran he sang excitedly, Qingzhou is good, Qingzhou is wonderful, Qingzhou's girls are beautiful. Master is here, once master is here the girls call. Ah, brothers, Qingzhou is right in front of us. After entering Qingzhou you can choose any girl you want, haha. The man suddenly raised his head and looked into the distance. When he saw Jianji and the other two women beside Yi Xian, his eyes lit up and he said excitedly, brothers, these three girls look pretty good. We can quench our thirst first, ha. At this moment, a sword suddenly pierced through the man's forehead. The sword flew out from the back of the man's head and blood splattered everywhere. The sword made a circle in the air before flying back to Yi Xian. Those people stopped in front of Yi Xian and his companions. Some of their eyes were filled with vigilance. At this moment, a young man suddenly stood out and stared at Yi Xian. Who are you? Yi Xian said indifferently, Qingzhou does not welcome you. Go back. The young man's lips curled into a sinister smile. Go back? What if I don't? A sword instantly pierced through the young man's forehead. The young man's eyes were wide open as he looked at Yi Xian in disbelief. You? Yi Xian opened his palm and the elegant spirit sword flew back into his hand. He faced the young man in the distance. I'll send you off. The young man fell straight to the ground. Beside Yi Xian, Lien Wanli glanced at him with a trace of a smile in her eyes. She liked this temper. In the distance the group of people stopped. There were a total of 600 to 700 people. Among them, the majority were at the Divine Unity realm and the weakest was at the Ethereal Opening realm. Furthermore, there were more than 10 at the Myriad Law realm. It had to be said that such a lineup was extremely terrifying. At this moment, an old man suddenly appeared not far away from Yi Xian's group. The old man glanced at Yi Xian and Lien Wanli with a trace of fear in his eyes. After a moment of silence, the old man looked at Yi Xian. You are? Yi Xian said indifferently, Qingzhou Yi Xian. Yi Xian? The old man and the people behind him looked at each other. They had never heard of him. The old man said in a deep voice, You are from Qingzhou? Yi Xian nodded. Hearing this, the old man narrowed his eyes. You are trying to stop us from entering Qingzhou? Yi Xian nodded again. The old man's expression gradually turned cold. I'm afraid you won't have enough people. Yi Xian held the spirit-elegant sword in his hand and slowly walked towards the old man. "Let's try?" The old man did not waste any more words. He immediately extended his right hand and clawed at Yi Xian from a distance. In an instant, a giant energy claw that was hundreds of feet long suddenly appeared above Yi Xian's head out of thin air, and then fell heavily. Yi Xian leaped and slashed down with his sword. Boom! The giant claw suddenly exploded. In the next moment, Yi Xian had already arrived above the old man's head. At the same time, a ray of sword light slashed down towards the old man's head. The old man's expression changed drastically. He clenched his right hand into a fist and punched towards the sky. On the fist, a powerful force condensed in an instant and then suddenly exploded. Boom! Along with a deafening explosion, the old man was instantly blasted hundreds of meters away. As soon as he stopped, a flying sword slashed across the battlefield. The old man didn't see the flying sword, but he could feel it. When he felt the power within the flying sword, the old man was horrified. He suddenly took out a black shield and placed it in front of him. The profound energy within his body surged madly into the shield. As the profound energy surged, the shield instantly emitted a dazzling black light. At this moment, the sword had just arrived. A sword directly pierced into the black shield, causing it to tremble violently before exploding with a loud bang. The sword pierced straight into the black shield. The old man's head flew into the air. Everyone present was dumbfounded. A divine combination realm expert killing a Dharma realm expert? Yi Xian walked to the old man's corpse. He looked up at the hundreds of people in front of him and pointed the sword in his hand towards the ground. "Everyone, I Yi Xian have taken care of Qingzhou. Can you give me some face and don't attack?" The hundreds of people looked at Yi Xian. No one spoke, but no one retreated either. Moreover, everyone's eyes were cold and some people's eyes were filled with undisguised killing intent. At this moment, a man walked out. He looked at Yi Xian with a gloomy expression. "Your Excellency, are you trying to block our path to wealth?" Yi Xian sighed in a low voice. "I have no choice. I am the Dean of Blue Waves Academy, and I am also a citizen of Jiang Country. Jiang Country has helped me time and time again. In addition, I am a kingdom scholar of Ning Country, and I have promised the king of Ning Country to protect Ning Country. If you come to Qingzhou, I am afraid that Jiang Country and Ning Country will be plunged into misery and suffering. It's not easy for me either. Really, it's not easy for everyone. Let's understand each other and everything will be peaceful." *T. At this moment, not far from the right of Yi Xian, a man suddenly said angrily, "Understand each other? We came from thousands of miles away and you want us to go back just because of a sentence from you?" Yi Xian suddenly loosened his grip, and the exquisite sword in his hand suddenly flew out. The voice of the man who spoke earlier stopped abruptly, because a sword had already pierced through the space between his eyebrows. He was unable to retaliate at all. In front of Yi Xian, the eyes of the few hundred people were filled with killing intent, but there was also a hint of graveness. Yi Xian gently waved his right hand, and the exquisite sword flew back into his hand. He held the exquisite sword and pointed it at the few hundred people in front of him. "Who else is unconvinced? Come out." Who else was unconvinced? The scene was incomparably quiet. Not far away, Lian Wanli looked at Yi Xian with a smile in his eyes. "A good man should be like this." Little Demon Tuoba nodded his head, as expected of my friend. Not bad at all. Everyone, not far away among the few hundred people in front of Yi Xian, a man in a black robe walked out. The man sized up Yi Xian. "If you want to scare us off with your strength alone. Forgive my bluntness, but you're not qualified." With that, the man narrowed his eyes and his right hand, which was hidden in his sleeve, slowly clenched. As long as Yi Xian spoke, he would immediately attack and catch Yi Xian off guard. However, Yi Xian did not say anything. He raised his sword and charged directly at the man. Seeing that, the man was slightly stunned. He did not even say a word? Fight directly? Did he have to be so direct? Without thinking too much, the man suddenly opened his arms, and two short sabers suddenly appeared. The next moment he charged directly at Yi Xian. Everywhere he passed by, saber gleams sputtered, and the ground was a mess. It was incomparably terrifying. The distance between them grew closer and closer. When they were less than 3 m away, Yi Xian suddenly stabbed forward with his sword, and a cold light flashed at the tip of his sword. Meanwhile, the man's sabers slashed ferociously. Every single time they descended, a strand of saber chi would slash down. In less than half a breath of time, he'd already swung his saber 100 times. The 100 strands of saber chi practically overlapped as they slashed down, and the formidable pressure they emanated caused some of the people in the surroundings to feel suffocated. The saber master. He was borrowing the momentum of the attack. As soon as the saber and sword collided, bang! A deafening explosion resounded abruptly. In an instant, both Yi Xian and the man retreated explosively by over 100 m. As soon as they stopped moving, the man suddenly joined his sabers together, and then he suddenly slashed at Yi Xian from afar. A strand of white saber chi flashed, and everywhere it passed, the ground split open and was so deep that the bottom couldn't be seen. Yi Xian suddenly pressed his fingers together and pointed forward. A sword suddenly flew out from the sword chest behind him, and it was swift like a bolt of lightning. The man's saber chi was instantly slashed into pieces, but the sword didn't stop. It continued forward and slashed at the man. The man's pupils constricted slightly when he witnessed this scene, and he suddenly tossed the saber in his hand. However, the saber had only just come into contact with Yi Xian's sword when it instantly shattered. At this moment, the man had retreated into the crowd, but Yi Xian's sword didn't stop. The expressions of those people changed drastically when they saw the sword slash towards them, and they retreated in succession. In the end, the sword only stopped after it killed 5 people. However, just as the sword was about to fly back, a hand suddenly grabbed it. It was a man. Taba stared fixedly at the man from afar. The 4th on the demon-level genius rankings, Xiahou Zhao. Xiahou Zhao raised his head to look at Yi Xian. Someone asked me to tell you something. Young Misson isn't worthy of trash like you. Yi Xian shook his head and chuckled, and his smile was slightly savage. What the fuck does the matter between me and Xiaoan have to do with all of you? I'll like whoever I want to like. Let me tell you, I want Xiaoan to be worthy of me. In Qingzhou, Yi Xian will King protect her. As soon as he finished speaking, the Lingxiu sword in his hand suddenly turned dark. P.S. There was a patient in the hospital today. He was very young, in his 20s. I took a glance and it was a fantasy book. It wasn't mine. So, I chatted with him for a while. Because I'm more familiar with him, we chatted very enthusiastically. We talked about all sorts of very popular novels and also about the authors. Finally, we talked about a very handsome author, Green Phoenix Peak. I asked him if he had read Green Phoenix's book. He said he had read Invincible Sword Realm, and that it was written very trashy, and the author was an idiot. Before I left, I kicked a pair of his shoes under the opposite bed. Did I go too far? Chapter 224. Evil Thoughts. The world was divided into yin and yang, and all things reinforced and restrained each other. Humans were also divided into good and evil. Humans were born with good nature, but in fact they were also accompanied by evil. For a powerful person, a good thought could bring prosperity to the world, but an evil thought would naturally lead to the destruction of all things. For Yi Xian, if you were good to him he would be good, but if you were evil to him he would be 10 times, no, 100 times more evil than you. He would treat people how they treated him. Yi Xian would never repay kindness with evil, but he would never repay evil with good. The moment the evil thought sword intent appeared, the sword in Xiahou Zhao's hand suddenly trembled violently, then instantly turned dark, and Xiahou Zhao's hand began to disappear. Xiahou Zhao's expression changed drastically, and he quickly released his right hand. The sword instantly flew back into the sword box behind Yi Xian. Xiahou Zhao's expression was extremely solemn. At this moment, a layer of skin had disappeared from his right palm. If he had been a little slower, his entire hand would have disappeared. What kind of sword intent was this? Xiahou Zhao raised his head to look at Yi Xian in the distance, but Yi Xian had suddenly disappeared. Xiahou Zhao narrowed his eyes, and in his gaze, a ray of sword light was getting closer and closer to him. It was a swift sword. Only a few people in the crowd could clearly see the sword's trajectory. Xiahou Zhao tilted his body slightly, and directly dodged the sword. After the sword passed, Yi Xian was already more than a dozen feet behind Xiahou Zhao. He dodged it. Yi Xian's face was expressionless, but his heart was slightly on guard. No enemy could be taken lightly or carelessly, not to mention that the person in front of him was an existence ranked 4th on the demon-level geniuses list. How could this kind of person be an idiot? Xiahou Zhao turned to look at Yi Xian with a cold expression. The number 1 genius of Qingzhou? You really are a frog in a well, ignorant. At this point, Xiahou Zhao's expression changed slightly because a flying sword was slashing towards him from afar. The speed was so fast that it had completely exceeded the scope of the divine combination stage. It should be said that even some of the 10,000 law stage couldn't possess such speed. This sword had far surpassed the average Dharma realm expert. Xiahou Zhao only took a step to the right. This step was enough to dodge the lightning-fast flying sword. It was extremely easy. This is the number one genius of the Qingzhou? At this moment, a middle-aged man suddenly walked out. He looked at Yi Xian, his eyes filled with mockery. So the number one genius of the Green Province is such trash. You, in the distance, Yi Xian casually pointed out, and a wisp of sword light shot out. Chi. The middle-aged man's voice stopped abruptly because a sword had pierced through his throat. The middle-aged man hugged the sword tightly with both hands. His eyes were filled with terror as blood spurted out from his throat like a fountain. Yi Xian turned to face the middle-aged man. I hate people who talk. As soon as he finished speaking, he opened his palm, and the sword in the middle-aged man's throat flew back and landed firmly in his palm. As he held the sword, Yi Xian didn't waste any words. He turned around and charged towards Xiahou Zhao, who was in the distance. There was a trace of seriousness in Xiahou Zhao's eyes when he saw Yi Xian charging towards him. Even though he'd easily dodged 2 attacks from Yi Xian, it hadn't been easy at all. Yi Xian's strength had slightly exceeded his expectations. Meanwhile, Yi Xian had arrived in front of Xiahou Zhao with his sword in hand. He raised his sword and stabbed. A powerful sword aura instantly enveloped Xiahou Zhao. As soon as the sword aura was unleashed, the ground where both of them stood instantly cracked. Xiahou Zhao was expressionless and he didn't dodge. Without any suspense, Yi Xian's sword pierced through the space between Xiahou Zhao's eyebrows. A tearing sound resounded. It was the sound of the air being torn apart. It's fake. Yi Xian's reaction was extremely fast. He turned around and slashed with his sword, but Xiahou Zhao was half a beat too slow, and a fist had already smashed against his chest. Bang! Yi Xian's figure shook violently, yet he wasn't blasted flying. Xiahou Zhao's expression instantly turned grim when he witnessed this scene, and he flashed backwards. This flash had directly flashed over 30 m away. Moreover, the clothes in front of his chest had split apart, and there was a deep mark on his chest. Xiahou Zhao's expression was rather savage as he raised his head to look at Yi Xian. There was a strand of white energy at Yi Xian's stomach, and it was exactly that strand of white energy that had forcefully blocked that punch of his. Sword intent. 2 forms of sword intent. Xiahou Zhao slowly clenched his right fist. After a moment of silence, his figure suddenly soared into the sky. A strand of destructive pressure suddenly appeared in midair, and as soon as this pressure appeared, the ground in an area of 300 m actually trembled violently. Countless people in the surroundings were horrified, and they retreated explosively. The expressions of Mo Yunqi and the others instantly became solemn when they witnessed this scene. Lian Wanli suddenly said in a light voice, "A heaven-rank martial technique." In the distant sky, the pressure emanating from Xiahou Zhao was still rising madly. At this moment, his tightly clenched right fist was emanating a strand of fiery red light, and strand after strand of formidable pressure was ceaselessly pouring out from his right hand. The might of the heavens and the earth. A heaven-rank martial technique possessed the might of the heavens and the earth. On the ground below, the spirit gray sword in Yi Xian's hand had transformed into the heavenly lightning that Yi Ling had given him. At the moment he grasped the heaven-rank sword, the sword aura contained within his sword instantly rose explosively. This aura was like a torrent that shot into the sky, and it forcefully blocked the aura emanated by Xiahou Zhao. In midair, Xiahou Zhao's expression was savage. His figure spun and then he suddenly punched downwards. Borrowing the heaven's punch, world crumble. As soon as he finished speaking, the aura within Xiahou Zhao's fist actually instantly rose explosively, and it had increased by at least 5 times or more. On the other hand, Yi Xian's sword aura was instantly suppressed. At the same time, a destructive force swept down from the sky, and it seemed as if it intended to destroy the ground. Under this formidable force and pressure, Yi Xian was like a small boat amidst a tempestuous storm, and he could be swallowed at any moment. Under the gazes of everyone, Yi Xian suddenly stomped his right foot on the ground, and his entire body transformed into a black ray of light that shot into the sky, deciding life and death with a single strike. At the moment that Yi Xian executed deciding life and death with a single strike, the sword aura contained within his sword instantly rose explosively, and the formidable sword aura directly suppressed the aura emanated by Xiahou Zhao. Moreover, everywhere the sword light passed, everything was torn apart like a hot knife through butter. The strike could be said to be his strongest strike. Especially when it was enhanced by the evil sword intent, the might of this strike was sufficient to destroy the heavens and the earth. Rumble, an explosion suddenly resounded in the sky, and then countless rays of sword light and fist radiance shot wildly in all directions. The surrounding people were greatly shocked and they hurriedly retreated once more. This time they retreated hundreds of meters away. As for where Yi Xian and Xiahou Zhao stood, they had already been engulfed by the countless rays of sword light and airwaves. However, explosions still rang out amidst the sword light and airwaves. Clearly the two of them were still engaged in an intense battle. This went on for an unknown amount of time. The sword radiance and the airwaves gradually dispersed. Yi Xian and Xiahou Zhao showed up in everyone's sight. At this moment, the two of them were over 60 meters apart. Yi Xian held the Heaven's Thunder Sword and pointed it diagonally at the ground. The Heaven's Thunder Sword was pitch black, and fresh blood continuously dripped from its tip. Meanwhile, Xiahou Zhao stood opposite Yi Xian. At this moment he had lost his right arm. When they saw that Xiahou Zhao had lost his right arm, the expressions of the people behind him sank. Without a doubt, Xiahou Zhao had lost. Xiahou Zhao glared at Yi Xian. I didn't lose to you. I lost to the heaven-grade sword in your hand. Yi Xian waved the sword in his hand proudly. This sword was given to me by my younger sister. Who can you blame for not having a heaven-grade treasure? Of course you can blame yourself. Who asked you not to have a younger sister? Xiahou Zhao was speechless. Holding the Heaven's Thunder Sword in his hand, Yi Xian felt very happy. In fact, as long as it was given to him by Yi Ling, he would like it. It was really good to have a younger sister. Of course, please don't be like little demon Tuoba. With such a younger sister, I'm afraid I'll be toyed to death. Xiahou Zhao looked at Yi Xian deeply. I underestimated you. The Situ clan also underestimated you. But don't worry, when I return they won't underestimate you anymore. At this moment, the Heaven's Thunder Sword in Yi Xian's hand suddenly turned into a sword light and shot out. Xiahou Zhao's expression changed drastically. He wanted to use his right hand to block it, but he was shocked to find that his right hand was gone. Because of this pause, the sword instantly pierced through the space between his eyebrows. A stream of blood spurted out from the space between Xiahou Zhao's eyebrows. Yi Xian walked slowly to Xiahou Zhao. Return? You still want to return? You're really thinking too much. As he spoke, he waved his right hand, and the storage ring on Xiahou Zhao's finger instantly flew into his hand. After receiving Xiahou Zhao's storage ring, Yi Xian was stunned. In the storage ring there was a truth-grade superior-grade spear. Apart from that, there were almost 100 million supreme-grade spirit stones. So rich. That was the first thought that appeared in Yi Xian's mind at this moment. The 100 million supreme-grade spirit stones were definitely looted by Xiahou Zhao from Azure Wave Province, and the high-grade superior-grade spear was definitely the same. When he thought up to this point, he gazed at the hundreds of people before him. All of them probably possessed more than half of the Azure Wave Province's wealth. If they were allowed to enter Azure Province, then it was obvious how horrifying the consequences would be for the Jiang Kingdom and Ning Kingdom. At this moment, the eyes of all the hundreds of people were filled with fear. Yi Xian had killed Xiahou Zhao, who was ranked at the 4th position on the demon-level genius rankings, so it meant that his strength had risen to the 4th position. Fear. No one wasn't afraid. But none of them were willing to retreat just like that. They'd arrived at Azure Province, and so long as they could enter Azure Province, then women, money, they could get anything they wanted. If they retreated now, then they would lose a lot. Right at this moment, a hunchbacked old man suddenly stood out. The Law Control Realm. This wasn't the Myriad Dharma Realm anymore, it was the Law Control Realm. The hunchbacked old man walked over to Yi Xian, and then he glanced at Yi Xian with an extremely gentle expression. The old man is the Grand Elder of the Dark Darkness sect in the Central Divine Prefecture. Even though my Dark Darkness sect isn't a first-rate power, it has over a dozen Myriad Dharma Realm experts, and while there aren't many at the Law Control Realm, there are still a few. When he spoke up to this point, he gazed at Yi Xian and spoke in a slightly apologetic tone. The old man didn't mean to threaten you. Really, he didn't mean to threaten you at all. Don't think too much about it. Yi Xian thought for a moment and then he smiled and said, I understand. Right, do you know of Karaki Academy? The old man nodded. Of course. Yi Xian smiled and said, I annihilated Karaki Academy. Right, I don't have any backing. Really, I don't have any backing at all. I killed over a dozen Myriad Dharma Realm experts and a few Law Control Realm experts of Azure Waves Academy. Oh my, what's with that expression, senior? Believe me, it's true. I, Yi Xian, don't have any backing. I did it all by myself. Chapter 225. After he heard Yi Xian, the old man just gazed at Yi Xian with a very calm expression. Yi Xian had a smile on his face and he seemed very amiable. After a short while passed, the old man grinned, "Sorry for the disturbance." As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around and left. In the end, he didn't choose to attack. He'd heard about Kuraki Academy's actions against Yi Xian in the Central Divine Prefecture, and Kuraki Academy's main academy was even stronger than his sect. However, Kuraki Academy had been destroyed, but Yi Xian was still here. That was sufficient to explain a great deal. He'd reached the law control realm, so he was very clearly aware that there were many people that couldn't be offended. Once he did, then it wouldn't just bring harm to himself, it might bring harm to his sect as well. However, he didn't leave. He just watched from the shadows. Obviously, he wasn't willing to give up. At this moment, not a single one of them dared to step forward when they saw Old Man Tuoba step back. None of them wanted to stand out. However, none of them left. Obviously, they weren't willing to leave just like that. As far as they were concerned, Pine Prefecture was a treasure trove. The treasure was right before their eyes, so none of them were willing to leave just like that. As for Yi Xian, he was clearly aware of that as well. So he didn't infuriate all of them. Because he would definitely be unable to defeat all of them if they attacked him together. Moreover, every single one of them had ulterior motives and they didn't trust each other. So he just had to deal with the one who stood out. Meanwhile, a man suddenly stepped forward. He glanced at Yi Xian with an icy cold gaze. "Everyone, there are so many of us." Meanwhile, a ray of light flashed. The man's voice stopped abruptly, and then his head flew into the air. It flew for over 10 m before it rolled on the ground. Some of the others couldn't help but take a step back when they witnessed this scene, and their eyes were filled with fear when they gazed at Yi Xian again. All of them were from Darkwave Province, and every single one of them could be said to be ruthless. However, this fellow before them seemed to be even more ruthless. He'd behead them at the slightest provocation. No one stood up and no one spoke. Yi Xian didn't say anything. He gently wiped the blood off the firmament thunder sword, his face expressionless. No one knew what he was thinking. The situation was in a stalemate. At this moment, a man walked out, but he was still very far from Yi Xian. He looked at Yi Xian and said, "Brother, I have no ill intentions. I just want to say a few words." Yi Xian nodded. "Go ahead." The man spoke in a low voice, "Brother, you're sufficiently strong. Even in the Central Divine Prefecture's younger generation, there are probably very few who can rival you in a one-on-one battle. However, brother, have you thought about it? Most of the people here are disciples of aristocratic families, mercenaries, and some disciples of sects." When he spoke up to here, he paused for a moment and said, "Brother, your actions are undoubtedly cutting off everyone's path to wealth, and you'll offend many powers. As for those people in the Azure Province, they might not be grateful to you." With that, he immediately retreated into the crowd. He was still very afraid of Yi Xian's flying sword. It was an arduous and thankless task. Yi Xian shook his head. If everything had to be done with an objective, then it would be too meaningless. For example, if everyone only thought about their own interests and disregarded the righteousness of the country when the country was facing a calamity, then could such people still be considered human? People could be selfish at many times, but there were also times when they couldn't. "I'm grateful." Suddenly, Lian Wanli walked over to Yi Xian's side, and she gazed at Yi Xian with a smile on her face. "Hi Scholar Yi, my Grand Cloud Empire will definitely remember this kindness for standing up for Pine Prefecture. It isn't just my Grand Cloud Empire, all of Pine Prefecture will remember this." A middle-aged man suddenly spoke from the crowd. "Why would we fear them if we join forces?" "We." Lian Wanli suddenly made a grabbing motion from afar. The eyes of the middle-aged man who'd spoken earlier suddenly opened wide while the veins on his neck bulged up. A moment later, his head was separated from his neck, and a bloody head had appeared in Lian Wanli's hand. Everyone in the surroundings was astounded when they witnessed this scene. Yi Xian was also shocked and he asked, What martial technique is this?" Lian Wanli replied indifferently, "Head-lifting technique." She looked at Yi Xian, "Do you want to learn it? It's very exciting to grab a head." Yi Xian was speechless. Suddenly, someone spoke from the crowd, "Everyone, if we don't join forces, we'll definitely be defeated one by one. Let's join forces." As soon as the voice resounded, a dozen people charged out from the crowd and went straight for Yi Xian and Lian Wanli. Seeing that someone dared to attack, the others wanted to join as well. Suddenly, 7 flying swords flew out of Yi Xian's sword box. Amongst the dozen-plus people that had just charged out, 7 of them were instantly beheaded by the flying swords, whereas the remaining few hurriedly stopped and had terrified expressions on their faces. But at this moment the surrounding people were ready to attack. Even though Yi Xian was very formidable, they had the advantage in numbers. Meanwhile, Yi Xian walked towards them with his sword in hand. Who else wants to attack? Well, no one dared to attack anymore. Don't be arrogant. Right at this moment, a black-clothed old man suddenly appeared not too far away from Yi Xian. Yi Xian recognized this person. It was that black-clothed old man who followed in Lanqiu all those years ago. However, this black-clothed old man wasn't from the Yin clan. The black-clothed old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, others might be afraid of you, but my Situ clan doesn't take you seriously. Since no one wants to stand out, then allow my Situ clan to do it. As soon as he finished speaking, he turned around to look at the hundreds of people behind him. Everyone, my Situ clan will deal with Yi Xian and the others. All of you can just head to Azure Prefecture. Of course, I have a small request, and that is, after entering Azure Prefecture, please, take care of State of Jiang and Blue Waves Academy. No one responded to the old man, because they clearly didn't believe the black-clothed old man at this moment. The black-clothed old man was obviously aware of this. He immediately waved his right hand, and 10 old men suddenly appeared behind him. 10,000 Law Realm experts. The black-clothed old man coldly looked at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, don't you have a sword immortal behind you? Old man, let me tell you, Karaki Academy is useless and afraid of the sword immortal behind you, but my Situ clan is not. At this moment, Yi Xian suddenly said angrily, not afraid of your ancestor. As soon as he finished speaking, he leaped and slashed his sword at the black-clothed old man. At this moment, Yi Xian was undoubtedly very angry. He finally understood why the mysterious woman was so angry. Not to mention the mysterious woman, even he would be angry if someone came to cause trouble for him every few days. The problem was, this mysterious woman wanted to destroy the world. She really wanted to destroy the world, and she even had the ability to do so. That wasn't the main point. The main point was that every time the mysterious woman attacked, the world pagoda within him would become more and more unstable. He didn't want to be played to death by the world pagoda. The black-clothed old man grunted coldly when he saw Yi Xian attack, and then he raised his hand and waved it. A powerful force surged out like a torrent. Bang! This powerful force forcefully pushed Yi Xian over 30 m back. The black-clothed old man didn't continue attacking, and he turned around to glance at the hundreds of others. Everyone, Yi Xian intends to obstruct all of your path to wealth. Don't all of you have any other thoughts? All of them exchanged glances, and the fear in their eyes gradually vanished and was replaced by killing intent. Meanwhile, a black-clothed man suddenly stepped forward. He gazed at Yi Xian and spoke fiercely, everyone, if we're really obstructed by Yi Xian here, then wouldn't we become the laughingstock of the entire sky dimension? A laughingstock. The expressions of all of them grew even colder. Most of them were reputable figures. If Yi Xian really obstructed them here, then they would definitely be too ashamed to return to the Central Divine Prefecture. Meanwhile, the black-clothed man said, everyone, why don't we join forces and eliminate Yi Xian before we share the wealth of the prefecture? Share the wealth of the prefecture. All of them seemed as if they'd been injected with stimulants when they heard this, and their blood instantly seethed. A cold smile curled up on the corners of the black-clothed old man's mouth when he witnessed this scene, and then he gazed at Yi Xian. Yi Xian, this old man thought that you were a great figure just now, but I never imagined that you would actually be so stupid. You actually intend to go against the entire Central Divine Prefecture for the sake of some ants. You're truly foolish to the extreme. When he spoke up to this point, he walked over to stand not too far away from Yi Xian, and the cold smile on the corners of his mouth had transformed into ridicule. Yi Xian, do you know why the world protectors have withdrawn from Pine Prefecture? Because the sects, clans and world protectors of the Central Divine Prefecture are prepared to sacrifice Azure Prefecture and Azure Wave Prefecture to alleviate the internal strife of the Central Divine Prefecture. Yet you overestimate your ability and actually intend to protect Pine Prefecture. Tell me, aren't you stupid? Stupid? Yi Xian was quite dazed. Indeed, if he didn't care about anything, then he would definitely be able to protect himself. He could head to the Central Divine Prefecture to find his younger sister, and then cultivate properly. His future would be bright. But what about Azure Wave Academy? What about the Jiang Kingdom? What about the Ning Kingdom? If Elder Ji hadn't lent a hand to save him that day, then his younger sister Yi Ling would have probably perished a long time ago. If Elder Ji hadn't risked his life to save him in the imperial capital, then he, Mo Yunqi, and Yi Ling would have perished a long time ago. Moreover, Elder Ji had entrusted Azure Wave Academy to him before he died. So, he intended to abandon Azure Wave Academy now that calamity had arrived? Moreover, the Jiang Kingdom's imperial family had helped him a lot. Moreover, Ning Kingdom. Tuoba Fu had asked him to take care of Ning Kingdom as well. And the Drunken Immortal Restaurant. For him, Yi Xian, the Drunken Immortal Restaurant had not hesitated to shed all pretense of cordiality with the Dark World and Karaki Academy. After a moment, Yi Xian suddenly shook his head and smiled. As expected, it's easy for people to bear grudges but difficult to remember kindness. This is the deep-rooted bad habit of humans. At this point he faced the swords in his hands. I, Yi Xian, am not saving Azure Prefecture but myself. As a person, one should never forget one's original intentions, let alone one's roots. As he thought of this, above the prison pagoda, the three swords suddenly trembled and the entire prison pagoda shook. At the same time, boom. A milky white sword intent suddenly swept out of Yi Xian's body and filled Yi Xian's surroundings. But in next, half of the sword intent gradually turned pitch black. At this moment, half of Yi Xian's sword intent was snow white, and the other half was dark. It was incomparably strange. When he saw this, the black-clothed old man in front of Yi Xian was stunned. In the next moment, his expression changed drastically, and he was slightly exasperated. Not good, his sword heart has broken through, and he might directly advance to the Sword Emperor realm. Kill him, quickly kill him. Chapter 226. The Sword Emperor. What was the Sword Emperor? A sword master was capable of borrowing the force of the wind and the force of the earth. On the other hand, the Sword Emperor was capable of borrowing the force of space and the force of the heavens. Once Yi Xian attained the Sword Emperor realm, it meant that he would be able to borrow the force of the heavens and the earth. In theory, the Sword Emperor realm and the Dharma realm were actually at the same realm. A true Dharma realm expert could utilize space and the energy of space with his own cultivation. The Sword Emperor realm was the same, but the difference was that he had to use his sword as a medium. There was a qualitative gap between the Divine Combination realm and the Dharma realm, and it was the same for sword masters and sword emperors. Once Yi Xian attained the Sword Emperor realm, it meant that he'd attained the Dharma realm. Yi Xian's current combat strength was already sufficient to kill a Dharma realm expert. Once he attained the Sword Emperor realm, how terrifying would he be with the heaven-rank sword in his hand? At this moment, the black-clothed old man was truly slightly terrified. The Dharma realm experts charged at Yi Xian when they heard the black-clothed old man. It wasn't just them, the surrounding experts from the Central Divine Prefecture attacked as well. The Sword Emperor. There were young sword masters in the Central Divine Prefecture, and they weren't very rare. However, they'd never heard of such a young Sword Emperor. Once Yi Xian attained the Sword Emperor realm, then who amongst them would be able to resist Yi Xian? They had to eliminate this obstruction. Yi Xian. Yi Xian didn't attack. He just stood there with a calm expression, and his body emanated a black and white sword intent. However, Mo Yunqi's group of three were already standing in front of him. Mo Yunqi's face was slightly pale as he gazed at the 10 Dharma realm experts that charged at the front. I'm fucking panicking. Does Bandit Yi have to gain enlightenment in the middle of a fight? They couldn't defeat them. They knew very well that they weren't a match for 10 Dharma realm experts. But none of them fled. Right at this moment, Lian Wanli suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian's group. In her hand was an azure dragon saber. The saber was very long and it dragged along the ground. As she gazed at the 10 Dharma realm experts that were charging at her, Lian Wanli suddenly strode forward, and then she held the saber in one hand and swiftly slashed it forward. Bang! The leader of the 10,000 Laws realm was sent flying hundreds of feet away by the saber. As soon as he stopped, his body cracked open and blood splattered everywhere. Instant kill? At this moment everyone was stunned. The few Dharma realm experts who were charging towards Yi Xian also stopped abruptly at this moment. The 9 of them looked at Lian Wanli in horror, their eyes filled with deep fear. The remaining mercenaries of the Divine Central Continent were filled with terror. Killing a 10,000 Laws realm cultivator in seconds, and with such ease. This was too terrifying. Even Azua behind Wanli was stunned, to say nothing of the experts from the Central Divine Prefecture. She knew that her king was very strong, but she never knew how strong Lian Wanli was. This was because Lian Wanli rarely fought, or rather he rarely fought seriously. Lian Wanli looked at the crowd in front of her and pointed at the old man in black with her left hand. Forgive me for being blunt, but you are all a bunch of trash. If we were to fight one-on-one, which one of you would be able to withstand a strike from this king? The expressions of the old man and the others instantly became unsightly when they heard this. They'd thought that Yi Xian was the most monstrous genius, but now it would seem like this woman was probably even more monstrous than Yi Xian. Aren't there a little too many monstrous geniuses in Pine Prefecture? After a short moment, the old man spoke in a low voice, "You're King Reliance of the Great Cloud Empire, and this old man is from the Situ clan from the upper dimension. My Situ clan's only target is Yi Xian. If you don't interfere, then my Situ clan will owe you a favor, alright?" Lian Wanli shook her head. "No." The old man's face turned gloomy when he heard this. "Aren't you afraid of causing trouble for the Great Cloud Empire?" Lian Wanli turned around and glanced at Yi Xian. Smiling, he said, "Actually, I didn't like this guy at first. He had a glib tongue and his skin was thicker than the corner of the city wall. Furthermore, he was a bit of a chauvinist. He's petty, vengeful, and shameless. But this chapter is not over. Please continue to the next page." Speaking of this, the smile on her face became wider. This time, Pine Prefecture is in trouble and everyone is in danger. Many clans and sects choose to protect themselves and even take advantage of the chaos to make money. However, he chose to stand up and protect Pine Prefecture. I suddenly realized that if you peel off his outer skin, you'll find that he's actually a good man with iron bones. The old man stared at Lian Wanli. "Do you know that you'll become enemies with the Situ clan by helping him?" Lian Wanli looked at the old man and said with a smile, "Let's become enemies. Who's afraid of who?" Then she pointed at Yi Xian, who was not far away. "Now that I'm here, no one can touch a single hair of his." As soon as she finished speaking, the azure dragon saber in her hand suddenly trembled violently, and a dragon's roar reverberated from it. Upon seeing this, the expressions of the old man and the others turned ugly. Are the people of Pine Prefecture not afraid of death? The old man stared fixedly at Lian Wanli. "Alright, then I'll allow you to witness the strength of my Situ clan." As soon as he finished speaking, a golden talisman suddenly appeared between his fingers. In the next moment, the golden talisman shot into the sky. "It's time to call for help." Meanwhile, Azul walked over to Lian Wanli's side and said softly, "My king, the Situ clan is a power in the upper worlds of the Central Divine Prefecture. It's a true super-8 clan." Lian Wanli spoke indifferently, "The Realm Defense Alliance is here, so I'll fight to the end." Azul glanced at Lian Wanli but didn't say anything. Meanwhile, little Tuoba suddenly walked over to Lian Wanli's side and said softly, "Big sister Lian, have you fallen for little Yi?" "Like?" Lian Wanli blinked and then he shook his head repeatedly. No. How could I fall for someone with such thick skin?" "Too thick. It's thicker than the walls of my home." Little Tuoba asked another question. "Then do you hate him?" Lian Wanli thought for a moment and said, "He has thick skin." Little Tuoba couldn't wrap her head around that answer. What sort of answer is that? Little Tuoba refused to give up and she wanted to ask something else. Meanwhile, Lian Wanli leaned over and whispered in her ear, "Even if a woman likes someone, she can't say it out loud. She has to be reserved. Otherwise, if a man thinks that you like him, then he'll be fearless and not take you seriously. Understand?" Little Tuoba blinked and seemed to be lost in thought. Lian Wanli turned around to glance at Yi Xian, and she recalled the scenes that had occurred in the imperial palace of the Great Cloud Empire. Her ears suddenly felt slightly hot, and her face flushed slightly red. In the next moment, she suddenly turned around and slashed with her saber. Bang! Over 30 m away, a few people were instantly slashed into two by the azure dragon saber. Everyone here was stunned. Has she gone mad? The black-clothed old man was quite stunned as well. Why did she suddenly attack? Lian Wanli gestured with her right hand, and the azure dragon saber flew back into her grasp. She glanced coldly at the corpses that she'd sliced up and said, "They're too ugly and truly an eyesore." The others were speechless. The black-clothed old man glanced at Lian Wanli. At this moment, besides fear, there was also a trace of fear in his eyes. Because he noticed that the woman before him was actually at the true Dharma realm. The true Dharma realm. He was naturally aware of the difference between the pseudo-Dharma realm and the true Dharma realm, but how old was the woman before him? Everyone in the world said that the most monstrous genius in Pine Prefecture was Yi Xian. Actually, the most monstrous genius in Pine Prefecture was this woman before him. The black-clothed old man took a deep and long glance at Lian Wanli, and then he turned to look at Yi Xian who stood nearby. Yi Xian had to die no matter what. And Lanxiu, the bloodline of the martial god. The Situ clan had to obtain this woman. The Situ clan couldn't allow any mistakes in this regard. So, even if they knew that the person behind Yi Xian might not be simple, the Situ clan still chose to eliminate him. The more monstrous Yi Xian was, the more worried the Situ clan was. Because the Situ clan was afraid that he would obtain the Yin clan's acknowledgement. That was why he'd come here personally this time. Not far away, Yi Xian was standing quietly. Comprehension? It wasn't so much comprehension as introspection. This chapter isn't over. Please continue to the next page. Self. No one in the mortal world dared to say that their Tao heart had always been the same. Even Yi Xian had been lost and even taken the wrong path. The stronger a person was, the more likely it was that he would lose his nature and forget his original intentions. It was easy to hold a grudge but difficult to remember a favor. It was easy to become bad but difficult to become good. The greatest enemy in a person's life is not others but oneself. When he thought up to here, the two strands of sword intent on Yi Xian's body suddenly vanished. The gazes of everyone here shot towards Yi Xian. The black-clothed old man stared fixedly at Yi Xian while he clenched his fists tightly. At this moment, his heart was in his throat. Once Yi Xian attained the Sword Emperor realm, then it was very likely that the Yin clan would acknowledge Yi Xian. Such a young Sword Emperor would have a limitless future. Even ancient clans and extraordinary powers like the Yin clan and Situ clan didn't dare underestimate such a monstrous genius. Most importantly, Lancio seemed to be interested in Yi Xian as well. Under such circumstances, the Situ clan's hopes had undoubtedly become even slimmer. Killing intent appeared in the black-clothed old man's eyes when he thought up to here. Right at this moment he suddenly raised his head. An invisible pressure suddenly smashed down from the sky, and many people retreated explosively. Under everyone's gaze, two old men walked out from a space. The law control realm. The black-clothed old man's expression instantly eased up when he saw them. They're finally here. They're the two revered elders of the Situ clan. The black-clothed old man walked over to them and bowed slightly, and then he pointed at Yi Xian and Lian Wanli. Both of them gazed at Yi Xian, and then one of them slapped his palm towards Yi Xian from afar as soon as he saw Yi Xian. As soon as Yi Xian threw his palm out, the space where he was instantly distorted. Meanwhile, Lian Wanli suddenly appeared in front of Yi Xian, and the saber in her hand slashed down swiftly. The sound of space being torn apart resounded. In an instant, the space where Yi Xian resided returned to normal. The gaze of the old man descended onto Lian Wanli, the law realm. Lian Wanli remained silent. The old man was just about to attack when Yi Xian, who stood behind Lian Wanli, suddenly raised his head to look at the old man. There's no enmity between me and the Situ clan, nor do I want to become enmity with it. Is the Situ clan bent on killing me? The old man looked at Yi Xian. It's okay if we don't start a feud. If you castrate yourself with a knife and swear that you'll never see Missin again and cut off all ties between you and Missin, the Situ family will let you and the people around you go. What do you say? The old man smirked. Of course, if you're unwilling, you can call the Sword Celestial behind you out. Don't worry, my Situ clan will not bully you with numbers. Old man, fight her one-on-one. Yi Xian shook his head and was about to speak when a woman in a plain dress suddenly appeared in front of the old man. She raised her head to look into the depths of the starry sky and frowned. What kind of trash is this? How dare you peep at me? Scram. In the distant starry sky, an aura suddenly receded like a tide, and it completely disappeared into the depths of the starry sky. At this moment, the old man in front of the woman in a plain dress suddenly said, "You're that Sword Celestial? Come, old man, I will fight you one-on-one. Let this old man have a taste of your strength." The woman in a plain dress retracted her gaze and looked at the old man. She just stared at the old man. Yi Xian was stunned and his face instantly turned pale. He lamented in his heart, "It's over? This world is hopeless." P.S. I went to talk to him again today and I recommended him to read The Only Sword. I told him that in order to read this book, I stayed up all night and I didn't even go to work. He went to read it and he said it was barely okay. I was delighted, and in the end I asked him to download Zongheng, but he said that Zongheng would charge for it and he wanted to read the pirated version. At noon I went to get lunch for my dad and he asked me to bring him a bowl of noodles. I swear to God, too much salt has nothing to do with me. I said it was the boss's fault. He kept scolding the boss. I'm grateful to all my friends who read the original version. End of this chapter. That you're tuning in to the Han Lee's Wuxia Adventures YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.